This is Jocko Podcast number 67 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. We are soldiers, Marines, grunts, ground pounders, infantrymen, jarheads, Tommies, doughboys, GIs. We march. We walk for miles. Miles that don't stop. Miles that don't end. Miles that are filled with fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the enemy. Fear of wounds. Fear of death. But we march on. Our boots try to stomp that fear into the ground. People talk of glory on the battlefield, but it is only talk. On the battlefield, there is only guttural instinct to survive and protect your brother. Things are done not for glory, but for love. We march on. We march in the heat and the cold and the rain and the snow. We march through deserts and streets and in the valleys and up the hills. Every step we take is a new step into the unknown. But at the same time, it is a step that has been taken thousands of times before by other soldiers in other times. The names change, the weapons change, the cause is different, but the faces are the same. The man does not change. The fear is the same, as is the will. The hardened will to drive on, to move forward, to march. We close with the enemy. Be it swords or bayonets, rifles or machine guns, spears or grenades, daggers or our bare hands. We bring our weapons to bear and unleash them with fury. There is no crowd watching. There are no admirers. It is only us. And when one of our brothers is killed, it rips us apart. Magnificent men. The best of us, beautiful human beings filled with hopes and dreams and filled with life. And in death, all those hopes and all those dreams and all that life is drained away, taken away, thrown away. And in that moment, when a warrior falls, the whole world should come to a standstill. The whole world should stand and bow their heads and grieve the loss of that hero. The whole world should stop and get on their knees and praise what that man has sacrificed and acknowledge the supreme and uncorrupted eminence of that soldier, of that warrior. But the world does not stop. carries on. It is only we warriors that truly mourn. It is us alone that bow our heads. It is us alone that bow our heads and mourn the loss of that fallen saint. The saint who has given everything for us. And then we warriors, we raise our heads. We raise our heads again, and with fire in our hearts, we lock and load our weapons, and we march. We march forward toward fear and toward evil and toward our fate. We march forward without any question of what is at stake. We march forward not for reward, but for duty. Not for ourselves, but for each other. We march forward not for glory, but for love. Forward. Forever. We march on. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
I was asked the other day by another veteran how to cope with losing friends, and I answered that question, and in that answer, as I thought about it afterwards, I thought of this eternal warrior. This warrior that's been around since man has existed. Hungry, tired, scared, but heroic. Heroic in his ability to put those discomforts aside and do what he must do. And tonight, we're going to look at another book about another band of brothers going back once again to World War II, back on the European continent. A book by a guy by the name of Charles MacDonald, who served as a company commander during the war. And he actually went on to become the deputy chief historian for the U.S. Army and authored a bunch of books about the war. But we're going to look at his first book today, which is simply called Company Commander. And he wrote this book just after the war in 1947. And, I get a bunch of books. Mm-hmm. And I've talked about this. Like, somebody tells me there's a good book out there, and I don't even try and read the reviews anymore. I just order it because I figure there's a chance it's good. And then when I get it, I kind of, have to crack it open and see if it's the kind of thing that I'm going to cover or that really suits the podcast. And this book, I just cracked it open right to the preface, which normally I go in the middle somewhere. I might take a quick look at the preface, but then I, will look throughout the book, and this preface, as soon as I got one sentence into this preface, or I say the first paragraph into this preface, and I was like, oh, okay, we're doing this book. So with that, let's go to the book and start with the preface. Once again, this book is called Company Commander by Charles B. MacDonald, written in 1947. Here we go. The characters in this story are not pretty characters. They are not even heroic if lack of fear is a requisite for heroism. They are cold, dirty, rough, frightened, miserable characters. GIs, Johnny Doughboys, dog faces, foot sloggers, poor bloody infantry, or, as they like to call themselves, combat infantrymen. But they win wars. They are men from companies I and G, 23rd Infantry, but they might as well be men from companies A and K, 16th Infantry, or they might be men from companies C and E, 254th Infantry. For their stories are relatively the same. Some may have fought the Germans longer than others, or some may have fought the Germans less. For all, it was an eternity. The characters in my story are not fictional, and any similarity between them and persons living or dead is intentional. And some of them are dead. This is a personal story, an authentic story. And to make a story of war authentic, you must see a war. Not a hasty taste of war, but the dread, gnawing daily diet of war. The horrors and fears that are at first blunt testimony that you are a novice, and then later become so much a part of you that only another veteran, through some sixth sense, may know that those same horrors and fears are yet there. I was an officer in the war, a captain and company commander of companies I and G. And because I was a captain, my lot was easier sometimes than that of Joe Private and Joe First Class and Joe Sergeant and even Joe Lieutenant. But when my lot was easier physically, it might be harder mentally because I knew Joe Private and Joe Private First Class and Joe Sergeant and Joe Lieutenant, and I could not suppress my love and admiration for them. But physical suffering can be worse sometimes, and when the GI's lot was harder than mine, I shall try and tell you that, because I am not the hero of my story. The heroes are the men from companies I and G, the lead scouts, the riflemen, the machine gunners, the messengers, and the mortarmen. Companies I and G are called rifle companies in the Army, and when you call a company a rifle company, you are speaking of the men who actually fight wars. I did not fight the Germans as long as some of the characters in my story. Some of them had been meeting the enemy since D+1, June 7th, 1944, when I joined them in September as a replacement company commander. They had completed the capture of a stubborn enemy garrison at Brest, France, the day before I joined them. They rested in an open field on the Brittany Peninsula for 5 days, and then they took a train ride on a French freight cars across France to meet the Germans again. So there's the preface, and you can see when he joins this company, these guys have already been fighting for over 3 months, close to 4 months. When he shows up, new guy, no combat experience, he shows up and has to jump right into the game. And here's some thoughts that he has coming fresh from the States. Company I, 23rd Infantry, I thought. You fought your way ashore in Normandy on D+1. You battled to the hot top of Hill 192 to pave the way for the St. Lo breakout. You stormed the ring of pillboxes at Brest and had your number reduced to 50 in the explosion as the Germans blew them up in your faces. And now they give you a company commander fresh from the States. They ask you to put your faith in me. I felt weak and ineffectual. My mind began to peruse the duties that were before me. And this is when he's out on patrol. He's kind of on his first patrol now. In one day, and at the most 3, I would be leading these men against a team of trained killers. I wondered how I would react. These men deserve the best leadership. Could I give it to them? They could boast a glorious combat record already, and I knew nothing. Suddenly, all my long hours of training for just such a role as this seemed pitifully inadequate. If only there were some way I could know just what it was like. It seemed incredible that this group of hardened combat veterans could accept me as an inexperienced youth of 21 to lead them into battle simply because he happened to come to them wearing a set of flashy bars on his shoulders. If only I could look into their minds and see what they were thinking. So you can see this guy's definitely feeling what just about everyone moving into a leadership position feels, which is, I'm not ready for this. Mm-hmm. And I don't know everything. And as I've said a bunch of times, that's okay. Everybody knows that you don't know everything. Everybody expects that you don't know everything. What you don't want to do is go act like you know everything, because they're going to see right through it. Mm-hmm. Now they're moving a little bit more, and we're starting to get closer to combat. My pulse quickened. So this is it, I said to myself, using a phrase that every replacement uses 1,000 times before he ever actually reaches combat. I would soon know if I could take it. I would soon know if I could justify the faith of the men of Company I. We dispersed to our company areas. In the darkness outside the tent, I noticed flashes of artillery to the east, and the deep rumbling of the big guns came from the distance. A voice in my brain kept repeating, "This is it. This is it." I stumbled blindly through the dark forest in the direction of the company. So obviously I'm fast forwarding some stuff here, and this is just him getting closer and closer to going into combat. And, you know, every veteran now has that feeling, you know, since the wars for us started, for this generation started, of, this is it. It's so true. Everyone's thinking that. This is it. This is it. This is the big one. This is, can I take it? And so many guys will say that that's what drives them into the military. For me, for sure. You want that test. And there's no bigger test than, hey, there's other human beings that are trying to kill me and I have to go kill them. That's the biggest test there is. And guys want to know if they can take it. Here's some of his thoughts. Be calm. Be businesslike. This is the same as maneuvers. Maneuvers just meaning training maneuvers. Give some orders. Start things moving. You're going to have a look at the German army. So he's going out on a little reconnaissance. And now they're getting in sort of a defensive position here. And he says this, back to the book. I decided to dispose my company initially as the lieutenant had done. We could make changes later. I would have preferred holding one of my rifle platoons in support position, but it seemed unwise, for our company frontage was great. So you can see he's already listening to, like, his lieutenant has his guys set up a certain way. He's going with it. He's not going up there and changing everything right away, because he's just going to kind of sit back and see how things go. Now, they're expecting to get attacked with small arms fire, but instead it ends up being some mortar fire. And here we go back to the book. But the sound of bullets did not come. In its stead came the sharp crack and heavy explosion that I knew must be mortar fire falling behind me. It sounded as if the shells were falling on the crest of the ridge that we had so recently left, but I took no time to look back. I increased my speed and dived behind a clump of bushes. There would be no protection from those bushes against the mortar shells, but I was comforted by their concealment. I lay there panting. So here's his first contact. This is it. This is it. My brain kept repeating madly over and over. I must not appear afraid. I must give these men confidence in me despite the fact that they know I'm inexperienced. They were playing their parts well. I had been unable to detect any attitude of distrust in their actions, and I had searched their faces for long periods of time. I must keep that confidence. I must. Scared, Captain? Sergeant Savage asked. So Sergeant Savage is like his senior enlisted guy, and he's looking at him. He goes, "Scared, Captain?" And he says, "A little," I admitted. I took a long, slow drag on my cigarette. We all are, Savage said. We always are. Pretty good vote of confidence. And You can see the senior enlisted guy trying to make him feel comfortable with it, right? That's a good senior enlisted guy. That's not trying to make him, not trying to go ego. Hey, what's your problem? You look scared, Captain. No, he said, hey, don't worry, boss. We're all scared. No big deal. We just got to stay professional. So these guys end up in a hunkered down defensive position that he's got a man. He ends up being there for quite a few days, where it's a pillbox, a bunker, and his main control point or command point is inside one of these pillboxes, and they end up with a bunch of guys in this pillbox, and then he's got little foxholes dug out away from the pillbox where there's little platoon guys and squads that are set up in these positions. And so his task is to maintain this security positions, and that's what he does. Going back to the book, I didn't plan to sleep at all the first night. Now that we were in position and the difficulties of moving in no longer worried me, I was filled with a growing fear that the Germans might hit us with a counterattack. I decided that the enemy must surely know that the troops were moving in and would attempt to dislodge us while we might still be disorganized. 11 men in a pillbox. 11 men who must live from day to day, never thinking of the immediate future, but only of the infinity when the war would someday be over. There was Sparky and First Sergeant Albin, Savage, Blackburn, Crotu, and me. There was Private First Class Willie Hagen, the tobacco-chewing 39-year-old Army regular who kept us laughing with sage tactical wisdom and served as first platoon runner. Then there was Private First Class Angelo Butare of Boston, second platoon runner who had lost 2 brothers in the war already. Private First Class Hubert Berger of Memphis, Tennessee, third platoon runner who's 18 years old and read his Bible every night. Private First Class Kenneth Lampton of Detroit, Michigan, weapons platoon runner who is also 18 and corresponded with college girls from Michigan. And Private First Class Erling G. Salberg of Fargo, North Dakota, who is 19 and cleanly good-looking, and the headquarters bazooka man. The cooks and jeep drivers, the supply sergeant, and the mail orderly had been left behind with the service company to keep us supplied. The changing of the guard at 4 o'clock revealed that it was raining outside, a slow, cold, miserable drizzle. I thought of the men in the forward platoons in their exposed foxholes, with no protection from the elements except shelter halves stretched across their holes, and nothing between them and the hostile killers in front of us but the muzzles of their own rifles. I had admired the unglamorous infantry soldier before, but as the rain continued to fall and the night grew colder, my pride at being a part of this dirty, miserable infantry knew no bounds. Now, like I said, he was in this main pillbox, which it has protection, right? It's got a roof, and they're a little bit relaxed in there, a little bit. They're protected, not just from the enemy, but they're protected from the elements as well, somewhat. So he goes out, and he's going out to visit the guys that are in foxholes that are just basically sitting out there bearing the elements, like he said, nothing between them and the enemy but the muzzle of their rifle. Back to the book. Any idea that I might have entertained that my visit would bolster the morale of these men was overshadowed by the effect the visit had on my own morale. How they could smile and laugh and joke in their present condition, I could not see. But each man had a cheery word for me as I approached. If I had possessed any misgivings that these men would weaken under the hardships of their cramped position and the adverse weather, they faded away into nothing. Their courage and fortitude made me admiringly envious and brought a lump to my throat. So he's thinking, I'm going to go out there and boost their morale. The opposite happens. The opposite happens. He's boosted by seeing them and seeing how intact and motivated they were out there. Back to the book. As we reached the right flank of the platoon, I noticed a man huddled in his foxhole, trembling violently beneath a blanket which covered his head. Lieutenant Ante grasped him by the shoulder. I thought I told you to get digging this hole out deeper, he said sternly. The blanket came off the soldier's head. You're putting me way off here by myself so I can be killed, he shouted, half sobbing. You want me to be killed. There's nobody over here but... Shut up, Ante said. You want the whole goddamn German army to hear you? Get to digging that hole. There's 2 men right here with you, and the next hole's 10 feet away. Nobody wants to see you killed. We turned away. I looked back over my shoulder at the soldier. He's been like that ever since he's been with the platoon, Auntie said. Uses every excuse he can get to go to the rear. He won't work to get himself warm like I try and get him to. If he doesn't come around tonight, send him back to the CP, I said. We can keep him there for a night and see how he turns out. So, although some guys are clearly in good spirits out there, you still got guys that are breaking down. And you got to deal with him. And you can see he's going to pull him off the line, get him back to the CP. And actually, I don't go into this, but he ends up getting evacuated. And when they get him back, they figure out that he's got appendicitis. So he's in rough shape. But so some time passes, and they're dealing with sort of clandestine attacks are coming. The Germans will kind of probe them, or sometimes they're receiving indirect fire, so mortars and artillery on a fairly regular basis. Back to the book. I awoke at 10 for the start of the 4th day in the pillbox. It was a day of K rations, of glorious sunshine, of adjusting artillery fire, of testing telephone lines after enemy shelling, of signing one's names to envelopes of countless letters, of requesting supplies from battalions, of 1 and 100 things that were becoming more and more routine. But always there was the deep, fearful dread of the enemy mortar shell that dropped unheralded from the sky, of the artillery round that screeched a fiendish warning as it approached, and the deep dread, too, of the darkness that would come tonight, just as it had come last night, and just as it would come the next night and the next. And any night the darkness might release a horde of fanatical German soldiers eager to kill and drive us from our holes and pillboxes, or perhaps a flame-throwing half-track spouting its flaming, oily death into the deepest recesses of the pillboxes. The nervousness was like a malignant disease that ate itself up and down the line and back again. Hear about that stress. You hear about that constant stress. And you notice it's the things that you can't control.
Yeah.
It's the things that you can't control. That's the horrible things about the mortar and the artillery fire. You can't control it. It's just random. And you can't control where that round hits. If it hits in your foxhole, you're dead. If it hits 3 feet away from your foxhole, you live. And I think they had these flame-throwing half-tracks, and I think just the to die by burning to death, everybody knows that's a nightmare. And so that's creeping in their minds as well. Back to book. It seemed that I'd only been asleep a few minutes when I awoke. The pillbox was a mass of moving men with apparently no pattern. A deep, dull throbbing filled my head, accentuated by a fierce pounding that pushed relentlessly against my temples. I jumped from the bunk with a start. The throbbing in my head was a big gun firing. The man seated there by the table was covered with a dull brown dust. Blood was streaming from a gash in his forehead. "A tank's firing right at us, Captain," Sparky said excitedly. They hit the shed with the mortarmen in it. Sergeant Patterson got a cut in the head." I tried to shake the cobwebs of sleep from my brain. I had been asleep for hours. It was daylight. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. I moved over to the wounded man. He was Sergeant Lee Patterson, a North Carolinian, and one of the squad leaders from the mortar section. The wound was bleeding profusely. Another man held a handkerchief immediately below it to prevent blood from running into the sergeant's eyes. "It's not bad," the sergeant said. "Just a cut from some loose brick. It was flying all around the cellar when the shells hit. Looks worse than it is, I guess." So now they're under attack, and you're going to notice a pattern. I don't know if I'll cover it enough, but this poor guy, MacDonald, Captain MacDonald, it seems like every time they get a major attack, he's getting awoken from being asleep, because he's not sleeping very often, but every time he puts his head down, you see almost every time he gets awoken, or every time they receive a major attack, it's because he's asleep, and boom, all of a sudden things start happening. He must have been so paranoid to go to sleep, knowing that this stuff was hanging over his head. So they're getting this pretty big coordinated attack, and then some aircraft show up, some P-47 shows up. like 5 P-47 shows up, and here's the description of that. Each plane circled high into the air and came down with the skill and grace of a pirouetting dancer upon its target, the bullets from its cannon beating a staccato chant of death as it dived on the Germans below. Someone behind me said, "Oh, them goddamn beautiful birds." We watched in silent admiration as the planes climbed once again. "Well, their work's done for the day," someone said. "Yeah," a mortarman answered, reaching for a shovel. "They'll go home now and have a short scotch and a hot bath and shack up with some mademoiselle or some limey wench. What a life!" "Yeah, and draw double salary for it," a headquarters man put in. "That's the life for me." Willie Hagen said, "Oh, dry up. You never had it so good." So that's a common thing, you know, and we're going to get Dave Burke on here, and I'm sure we'll hassle him about being a pilot. I mean, that is, you go, you do your mission, and then you're flying back to base. Mm-hmm. The bases are in friendly areas, and they're protected, so you're going to get a short scotch and a hot bath. And again, fast forwarding a little bit, and also going back to him being asleep and being rudely awakened. Here we go, back to the book. I was nodding off, and as the hands of my watch neared 3 o'clock, awakening each time with a start and shaking my head in an effort to clear the sleep from my brain. A shot rang out. It seemed to come from the very entrance of the pillbox and was the cue that set off a fusillade of small arms that reverberated back and forth among the hills. I could discern the slow chatter of one of our heavy machine guns, then the intimidating guttural tone of a burp gun. All the sounds seemed to emanate from the area around the farmhouse, as if every conceivable type of small arms vied to be heard above the accompanying noises. The explosion of a German-type concussion grenade joined the uproar. An American grenade exploded and its fragments whined through the air. A few rounds of mortar fire exploded above the din. I heard the guards scuffle and curse as they tripped on the entrance to the pillbox. I was suddenly more afraid than I had ever been before. My body seemed weak all over, and I wondered if I had the strength to stand up. I opened my mouth to sound the alarm, and I wondered if anything would come out. "Wake up, everybody!" I shouted, surprised that the words actually came forth. "I don't want anybody caught sleeping in this damn pillbox." We had waited long enough. The Germans had come. The sound of small arms continued, heightened by the explosions of dozens of light mortar shells. Fear gripped my body and left me trembling. I was not so much afraid of what was happening as I was of the horrible visions my mind had dreamed up of what would happen should we fail to repulse the attack. I visualized the mad dash to reach the entrance to the pillbox, to escape entrapment within, only to be met by a hail of enemy fire or a hellish blast of a flamethrower. My imagination ran a gauntlet of evil. So this is a counterattack. Well, this is what you've been waiting for. Now the company of veterans will find out what it has in this youthful, inexperienced CO. Quit shaking, goddammit. Stop trembling all over. Get control of yourself. Act like a soldier, goddammit. At least you can impersonate an officer. Savage tried the battalion phone. The handle, which should have produced a ring, made an unnatural grating sound. "The line's out," he cried. "I'll try the other line, Blackburn. Blackburn, get your radio set up outside." So this is, despite the fact that they've been mortared and they've taken some fire and they've had some little probing attack, this is the big one. This is it. The Germans had come. And it's interesting to hear his thoughts as this is going on. He's trying to tell himself, stop shaking, calm down, act like a soldier. Hey, if nothing else, just pretend that you're a soldier right now. Just act like an officer should act right now. Classic. So they start receiving this pretty intense attack, and he gets on the radio. Eventually get the radio set up, and he says, "Attack is hitting my left flank and right flank of Love Company. Their lines must be out too. Fire us, concentration 221, over." So what they do is, and they get in these defensive positions, they set up and they have pre-designated firing areas where they can have our friendly artillery or mortars bomb areas They already know where they are. So this one was called Concentration 221. That's wherever the enemy was attacking from. They have a name for it. They say put bombs on 221. Boom, you can get it done really quick. And it pretty much almost immediately halts this attack. And of course, that attack goes away. They kind of get that one under control. And now he's tired because he didn't get much sleep, so he goes back to sleep. And here we go back to the book. It seemed that I had been asleep for hours when I awoke suddenly with a start. Sparky's voice came to me from somewhere in the distance. I'm trying to get the artillery. I'm trying to get the artillery. Blackburn's voice was somewhere else beside it. Get me Captain Anderson. Get me Captain Anderson. But what was the noise in the background? What was that pounding? Someone must be beating on the pillbox with a sledgehammer. What was that deafening noise? I jumped from my bunk. My feet stung from the rough contact with the concrete floor. That was artillery and mortars exploding in my head. I couldn't think. I shook my head sharply to clear the sleep from my brain. The Germans had come again. And what mortars and artilleries. Good God, they must be firing every weapon around for miles. There was a wild look in Sparky's eyes. They've hit all 3 platoons, Captain, he cried. Head on. They're pounding the hell out of them. Worst barrage I ever heard. Worst barrage I ever heard, Captain. So like I said, whenever Captain MacDonald falls asleep, they're getting attacked. And that's what they're receiving, really heavy attack again. So they repulse that first attack, and now they're coming back at him again, and this time it's with some serious artillery. For God's sake, get us some artillery, Captain, he cried. They're knocking the hell out of us. Small arms and burp guns and this goddamn mortar and artillery fire. I never saw such a barrage. We got to get some help or we'll never stop them. For God's sake, Captain, hurry, Middlebrook said. His voice was half frantic. I got 2 wounded men here in my pillbox now. God knows how many more are out there. I suddenly remembered the 155s. That close-in concentration we had zeroed on our front. So 155 is the bigger artillery shell. It's the big daddy. And they had got a concentration of fire that was really close to them. So, hey, if we're getting like just about to get overrun, we can call this particular concentration of fire. That close in concentration we had zeroed on our front. What was it called? Queen 163. Queen 163. Oh God, let us get the 155s. Hello, Tear 1 to Tear 3. Roger. Tell Tear to give us the 155s. Concentration Queen 163 and fast. Over. So he calls in that concentration, which is really close to them. You're calling in 155 millimeter mortar shell. I want to say it has like 25 or 30 pounds of explosive in it, and they're calling in a bunch of it. And here we go. My heart skipped a beat. Savage ran back inside to relay the news to platoons, and the big artillery shells whispered their messages of outgoing death. The deafening explosions to our front were followed by the noise of shrapnel spraying the trees around the farmhouse, and small pieces of spent shrapnel fell around us. So they're calling those bombs so close that they're getting hit with the shrapnel from the bombs. That's how close the enemy was, and that's how close they're calling these bombs in. I called for a repeat on the barrage. And when the battalion said, Roger, I knew we had won. No attacking force could withstand a barrage like that. So that's a command that you use when you're calling in artillery. It's called repeat, which is actually why you never say repeat on the radio. When you see in a movie someone says, oh, can you repeat that? You don't actually say that. You don't say repeat unless you're specifically doing this, getting them to call more bombs in.
What do you say then on the radio?
Say again.
Oh, say again. Right?
Yeah, you say again. And so they call these big bombs come in. And another couple days go by. They end up spending a total of 9 days in the pillbox and in that position. And then finally they get told, okay, we're going to pull you out of the pillboxes. And we're going back to the book. I tried to keep my voice in a normal pitch through the conversation, but I wanted to jump and kick and scream with joy. Tears came to my eyes, and I thought I would choke with happiness. It was almost too wonderful to be true. My battalion runners would arrive around midnight, leading the men of Company B. We were getting out of the pillboxes. And tonight, Company I was to be relieved. So there you go. 9 days in the pillboxes. The other company, Company B, comes out to relieve them, and they're doing a turnover with Company B. So he's sending like one platoon back at a time, and he's staying there with the new company commander, whose name is Captain Cowan. And we're going back to the book. A few minutes later, a call came for Captain Cowan over the platoon phone. A tenseness came over his face as he answered. He handed the phone back to the soldier sitting at the table. "They just killed one of our own men," he said to me. "One of my squad leaders was moving around to the front and was going back to his hole. One of the barmen let him have it. Thought he was a German. I wondered how it would feel to have one of your own men killed by an accident. Having a man killed by the enemy would be bad enough, although I had been mercifully spared that thus far." I shuddered. "My men are nervous as hell," Captain Cowan said. "They've heard all sorts of rumors and stories about these positions. Makes them trigger happy." So we got a blue on blue. Guy's first night in position. And they're freaked out. They've heard all these rumors. They know that these guys are getting pounded by the enemy and the Germans keep attacking, and they get so paranoid that they accidentally shoot one of their own guys. Now, these guys get moved to the rear. Company I kind of get they get moved back a little, so they're not on the front line anymore. And this was kind of an interesting look on that. It seemed, back to the book, it seemed now we were in a quiet position. Every officer in the division with rank of major above wanted to inspect the company area. They condemned the men for not having shaved or for wearing knit wool caps without their helmets, evidently an unpardonable misdemeanor, or for untidy areas around the dugouts. These officers did not inspect my first platoon area, however, usually passing it over with the excuse that it was a bit far to walk, but we laughed inwardly, knowing that it was the threat of enemy shelling that kept most of them away. So, oh, you're back in the rear. Now everyone wants to come and meet you. Meet the boys, because there's no danger there. Well, guess what? The boys know. The boys know what's up. Now, he's about to get an order to go out on the attack. So he's been in a defensive position. Now he's moving to attack. Get set. It's coming now. The attack order. At last, you're going to attack. There's no chance now for a reprieve. The CO of the 393rd had insisted that we attack immediately to relieve the besieged unit. The colonel continued, but he had succeeded in putting off the attack until morning. We would jump off slightly before dawn. At 7 o'clock, attacking astride the east-west highway. Company I would attack on the left. Additional ammunition would be available later at battalion. The platoon leaders were assembled when I returned to the company. I only had one map of the area, and there was no place where we could have a light to examine the map with the lieutenants. Sergeant Albin's slit trench was deeper than the others, but at that it amounted to little more than the snow scraped from the earth and a few inches of frozen earth removed. The men hastily threw dead branches across the makeshift hole, and I wriggled underneath with my map and a book of matches. One by one, the platoon leaders crawled in to receive the order. I would strike a match and give them a brief glance at the map, now wet and sodden from the melting snow. I wondered if I could have drawn any worse conditions under which to issue my first attack order. So here they had moved forward, but now they're getting ready to attack, and he's given his first briefing to his platoon leaders. He only has one map, which is completely ridiculous. And I think about, like, every single guy, when we would go out on the battlefield, every single guy would have a battle map. Every single guy. If we take 30 guys, they all are going to have a battle map with them. So here we are, the whole company of 150 guys. We've only got one map, and he's got it. And by the way, it's soaking wet. And by the way, for your briefing, nowadays we go into a big secure area with a PowerPoint and big projector up, and we go through all these slides that are well prepared. He's got a match in a hole, and he's given this brief. That's what I'm talking about. So they end up in a forward position, and as this attack goes, they end up now having to switch from attacking to a defensive position, and things start to go sideways really, really quick. And this ends up, this is actually the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. It's obviously a famous battle, and this is sort of the beginning of it, although they did not know that at this time. So here we go, back to the book. I took stock of our defensive situation. We were one rifle battalion thrust into a densely wooded area with no terrain features that favored the defender, with orders to hold at all costs. We were hastily dug in along a highway, facing the direction from which we hoped the enemy would come if he had to come. No company had been able to withhold a support platoon. There was no support company. Thus, the defense was a thin, single line of riflemen. So there's no backup. That's the situation they're in. A shallow draw lay to the front of my rifle platoons, with a higher ridge rising beyond it, over which the enemy would soon be coming. Another draw led up to my left flank, protected by 2 light machine guns and a few riflemen in position which no man in his right mind would place machine guns unless he had no other method of defending the probable enemy approach. These guys are in a horrible situation. Our right flank lacked 50 yards of tying in with K Company along a fire break which bisected the highway. We had no anti-tank defense except 2 Sherman tanks and a bazooka with 3 rounds of ammunition. We were being supported by 99th Division Artillery, an outfit about which we knew nothing, except this was their first action except for holding a quiet defensive sector for a month. But there was nothing that could be done now but wait. At 10:30, a jeep loaded with men clipped down the highway toward the rear at breakneck speed. That would be the vanguard of the retreating battalion from the 99th. The Germans would be here soon. Just imagine that. You're there to help out and defend this position and support this battalion, and the first thing you see coming from ahead of you is a jeep filled with ragtag soldiers going as fast as they can away from the enemy. Craziness.
Yeah.
Craziness. And here it continues. A ragged column of troops appeared over the wooded ridge to the front of the 2nd and 3rd platoons. There were not over 200 men, the remnants of 900 who had fought gallantly to our front since they were hit by the German attack the preceding day. Another group the size of a platoon withdrew along the highway, donating a few hand grenades and clips of ammunition, which they passed to my 1st platoon. 2 men stayed to fight with my company. It's legit. You just got overrun. Some guys are giving away ammunition, giving grenades away, and these guys are, hey, where can I help out? 2 enlisted men carrying a badly wounded lieutenant stopped, exhausted, with my 3rd platoon. They could carry him no further. I called for a litter squad. The riflemen could not be sure if the next troops that appeared over the ridge were friendly or enemy. I alerted the artillerymen to call for fire in the event the approaching troops were German. Lieutenant Brock's call came a few minutes later, scarcely preceding a hail of small arms fire, which sounded like the crack of thousands of rifles echoing through the forest. There was no doubt now. My men could see the build caps of the approaching troops. They were Germans. And, you know, we're going to get to a point as I go through these books and I highlight little sections and I read that little section. I'm about to get to a point here shortly where I'm just going to read the whole damn section because it's so much. It's a company that's about to get overrun, right? It's a company that's about to get overrun by Germans, and it's really interesting to hear what this looks like from the company commander's perspective. But this is it. This is you're losing the battle. I mean, he survives, but it's as bad as it gets. It's as bad as it gets. Back to the book. Enemy bullets whistled through the trees around us. I jumped into the slit trench with Savage and Blackburn. Requests after requests for artillery and mortar support came from the platoon leaders. I called for every concentration listed on my overlay and for variations of each. So that little thing I was talking about where you're calling for these concentrations, you got 2, 2, 3, and this one and that one. He's just calling for all of them. Calling for all of them. Just bomb everything. The inevitable maddening 3 rounds fell each time. So they're trying to conserve in the rear. They're trying to conserve ammunition. So they're firing 3 rounds at a time. And he's do it again. The platoon leaders begged frantically for more. I began on one side of the company area and called for concentrations all across our front and back again. Lieutenant Sawyer called for barrage after barrage of 81 millimeter mortar fire. The crack of small arms reached an ear-splitting crescendo like static on a forgotten radio during an electric storm. I lay flat on my back in the slit trench, the platoon phone to one ear, the receiver of the battalion radio on the other. The chill from the frozen earth seeped through my clothes and I shivered, but I was surprised at my own calmness. The long nights of shaking terror in the pillboxes convinced me that I would never be calm in combat. I did not know what had possessed me to keep calm. Surely this was the most serious situation in which I had ever found myself. The small arms fire reached another crackling crescendo. The small arms fire reached another crackling crescendo. Long had several men wounded. Long is one of the other commanders. He didn't know how many or how badly. The enemy bullets were too thick to move around. I called again for litter squads. Wave after wave of frantically screaming German infantry stormed the slight tree-covered rise held by 3 platoons. A continuous hail of fire exuded from their weapons, answered by volley after volley from the defenders. Germans fell left and right. The few rounds of artillery we did succeed in bringing down caught the attackers in a draw to our front, and we could hear their screams of pain when the small arms fire would slacken. But still they came. Artillery and Nebelwerfers, which is like another kind of cannon, a German cannon, with their accompanying terrifying screams, played a deep accompaniment in the background. The shells exploded to our rear and around the road junction to our right. We ignored their crushing explosions, thinking how thankful we were that their effects were reserved for others than ourselves. The small arms fire rose and fell again and then again, indicating that the attacking troops had withdrawn momentarily to the bottom of the draw to regroup before launching another suicidal assault. Reinforcements streamed over the ridge behind them to join the assaults. The draw and the highway were littered with their dead and wounded, but there seemed to be no end of their fanatical attacks. 2nd platoon reported a company soldier killed. It was the first death in Company I since I had taken command 3 months before, but the news was not so staggering as I had expected it would be. There was too much other excitement. The dead soldier was Technician 5th grade Martin W. Carlson from Pennsylvania. He was an aide man whom the rifleman idolized, who had jumped from his foxhole to aid a wounded soldier nearby. A bullet pierced his helmet and he fell face forward into a hole of the wounded rifleman he had sought to aid. He was a non-combatant, according to the rules of warfare, and was denied the privilege of wearing the combat infantryman badge and the $10 per month pittance for dangers and hardship endured. But death made no distinction. Message after message came over the platoon phone. Lieutenant Wilson was badly wounded. He could not walk and must have a litter. Ammunition was running lower and lower. The M Company machine gunners with the 1st platoon were out of ammunition except enough to keep one gun firing a few minutes longer. The 60mm mortars found their ammunition supply so low that they fired only when the enemy was actually assaulting. Germans were being killed as close as 10 yards forward of the foxholes. Hand grenades were practically all gone. Yeah, this is it. There was no solace from the battalion. Each call for litter bearers or additional ammunition was met with the maddening words, "We're doing all we can." I told them we could not hold out much longer unless we got additional ammunition. Captain Montgomery said, "We must hold. Our orders are to hold at all costs," he said. I wondered if he could possibly realize the meaning of those words. We must hold until every last man was killed or captured. Company I's last stand. And what is to be gained? Nothing but time. Time born of the bodies of dead men. Time. 7 times the enemy infantry assaulted, and 7 times they were greeted by a hail of small arms fire and hand grenades that sent them reeling down the hill, leaving behind a growing pile of dead and wounded. But withal, the attacks seemed poorly organized. There was no supporting artillery or mortar fire on our positions, and I wondered why they had not yet found the open flank on our left. There was only the suicidal wave of fanatical infantrymen whooping and yelling and brandishing their rifles like men possessed. I looked at my watch. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. Time was passing amazingly fast. Long was one of the other platoon commanders. Long said he saw enemy tanks. There were 5 of them, giant tigers lumbering down the road 300 yards away, surrounded by over 100 enemy infantrymen. Get those Shermans into action. Sherman was our U.S. tank. Get those Shermans into action. It's your only hope. He's talking to himself. You might hold off the infantry even with your ammunition practically exhausted, but riflemen can't fight Tiger tanks. The 1st platoon has your only 3 rounds of bazooka ammo. Unless the Shermans can stop them, 3 rockets are all there is between you and Company I and Kingdom Come. So, small arms, obviously machine guns, they don't do anything to a tank. And there's 5 enemy tanks coming, and they only have 3 bazooka rounds, which a bazooka round can stop a tank. But, you got to hit. It's got to be a good hit and all that. So he knows he's in big, big trouble. I called Sergeant Garcia to send a man to contact the tankers and tell them to move immediately to their former positions on the left flank. This business of improved positions was so much bosh. Garcia's answer was stunning. They're gone, Captain. They pulled back to K Company 15 minutes ago. So he's expecting the Sherman tanks there to be help out. They're gone. I did not take time for the full meaning of his words to sink in. Giving our call sign over the radio, I asked Colonel Tuttle and told him my plight. Either I get those tanks back to my left flank or I could not possibly hold the position. While waiting for the colonel's answer, I tried barrage after barrage to destroy the Tigers with artillery and mortars, but we made not a single hit, and the near misses only stopped the infantry temporarily, not phasing the great steel monsters in the least. They waddled effortlessly on toward the hapless riflemen. A round of 88 millimeters snapped the top from a fir tree above our heads, and fragments sprayed down in all directions. There could be no doubt now. The Tigers had arrived. Round after round crashed into the area. A momentary shrill whistle followed by a deafening explosion and a sharp thud of the round being fired, the latter reaching us after we heard the shell explode. "For God's sake, Captain," Long screamed over the phone, his half-voice sobbing. "Get those tanks down here. Do something. For God's sake, these bastards are sitting 75 yards away and pumping 88s into our foxholes like we're sitting ducks. For God's sakes, Captain!" "What about your bazooka?" He said a bullet had gone in one end and bent the tube so the rocket would not pass through. Colonel Tuttle was on the battalion radio. The tankers said it would be suicide for them to face the Tiger tanks. They would not move unless he gave them a direct order, and then he was afraid they would disobey it. And he was inclined to agree that they stood no chance against the more heavily armored Tigers and the 88s. So these American tanks, they can't fight against the Tigers, and so they're backing up so that they can survive. I burned with anger, and I must have been insubordinate. If my men could fight the armor-plated monsters with nothing but rifles and die in the attempt, the tankers could afford to try it with medium tanks. If we don't get the tanks, we can't hold another 5 minutes, I said slowly, and finally, "Thank you, sir. Roger, out." And for those of you that don't know, I've explained this before. Out means you don't need to talk back to me. You don't need to, I'm not requesting a response. Out means I'm done. I'm hanging up the radio, which is interesting that normally the junior person, the says, over, and it's the senior person that says, "Hey, don't talk to me anymore," right? I'm done with you. So he's saying to his leader, he's saying, "If we don't get the tanks, we can't hold another 5 minutes. Thank you, sir. Roger, out." Shades of General Custer. Company I's last stand. Hell, what does it matter? You never expected to get out of this war alive anyway. Not really. I gave Long the news. He was frantic. There was absolutely nothing he and his men could do. A direct hit had landed on one of the heavy machine guns. Another had hit Technical Sergeant Smith's foxhole. Smith was the platoon sergeant. Long didn't know if he was dead or not. The other machine gun crew was out of ammunition and was withdrawing. He was powerless to stop them. He was afraid his left flank and the draw was falling back, but he couldn't see to make sure. "Hold, Long," I cried. "For God's sakes, hold. We've got to hold." I wondered how I made my voice so convincing. I wanted to throw away the platoon phone and the battalion radio and everything connected with the war and bury my head in my hands and cry, cry, cry. The infantry assault upon the other platoons continued. The sound of the battle reached a height which I had never thought possible before. The burst of the 88mm shells in the woods vied with the sound of hundreds of lesser weapons. It couldn't last forever, I thought. It must stop sometime. It must stop, but when and how? I looked toward the draw between me and the highway. About 20 men were walking down the draw toward the rear. I recognized several men from the light machine gun section and a machine gun crew from M Company. The others were riflemen from 1st Platoon. I did not know where they were going. All I knew is that somehow I must stop them. I jumped from the slit trench and ran toward them, ignoring the crack of bullets through the trees, waving my arms and shouting for them to stop. They turned to look at me with vague, blank expressions. They seemed to wonder who was this crazy man who wanted them to do this foolish thing. I saw that it was the entire left flank of 1st Platoon. The thin lines of the remainder of the platoons would soon be cut off from the rear. The 60mm mortarmen a few yards away were dismantling their weapons. I managed to get the men to move to my CP, but I could not stop them there. They walked slowly on towards the rear, half-dazed expressions on their faces. So his guys are leaving, and he's doing what he can to get them to stop and fight, but they're leaving. It's not happening. The guys know, and they're out. I mean, they're out of bullets, right? They're out of bullets. They don't have any ammunition left. There's nothing to do, so they're leaving. I jumped into the slit trench and grasped the radio handpiece. I sat on the edge of the trench, ignoring the whistle of bullets and the crash of 88mm shells around us, as everyone seemed to be now doing. Get the platoon leaders on the phone, I called to Savage. Hello, Roger 1, I said into the radio, not waiting for my acknowledgement that they were receiving my message. This is Mac. My left flank has fallen back. I can't stop them. The Germans are overrunning my left platoon. I'll try to build up another line along the fire break. We can't hold here. There, I had said it. This was I Company turning tail and running. This was I Company retreating. This was I Company hauling ass. This was I Company running like a son of a bitch. Strangely, I didn't give a damn. I was utterly void of feeling. Savage held the platoon phone toward me. I can't get long, he said, and Scotty's here with us now. Don't sound afraid. You got to sound like you mean business. Hello, Brock, I said calmly. They've overrun Long's position. Swing your platoon back to the left rear, and we'll build up another line along the fire break. Did you get that, Garcia? Pull back and we'll tie with K Company. My CP's pulling out now. We've got to hold at the fire break. Do you understand that? We've got to hold the fire break. The men in my CP group were already moving towards the rear. I grabbed my musette bag and my carbine. Savage took the phone. Blackburn grabbed the radio. We ran toward the rear. We reached the north-south fire break and crossed it. The foxholes which battalion had occupied were along the far edge of the clearing in a patch of small firs whose interwoven branches formed a small, dense, green barrier. I knew that any fight here would be at close quarters because the Germans would be able to advance unseen to the edge of the fire break 15 yards from the foxholes we would occupy. But it was the only spot where we had any possibility of holding. I ran up and down the line, shouting, "We've got to hold him here! We've got to hold him here!" The men stared back at me unbelievingly. I was asking headquarters men, armed with carbines and pistols, to hold off hordes of attacking Germans that had already broken through all our rifle platoons could offer. There was only one machine gun, a light gun manned by Private First Class Richard Cowan of Wichita, Kansas, set up 5 feet from the foxhole which I occupied. The Germans were almost upon us before we knew what was happening. We could not see them for the low-hanging branches of the fir trees across the fire break, but we could hear their shouts and shrill whistle signals which evidently came from their leaders. I decided they were a flanking group that was on its way unseen around our left flank even as we left our former CP. The attackers who had dislodged 1st Platoon could not have reached us so quickly. Cowan began to spit machine gun fire across the narrow fire break, and I heard a German scream with pain. The headquarters men fired their carbines and pistols into the low-hanging branches. The fir trees to the right were too thick to see the area where the rifle platoons were supposed to be going into position. I wondered if they had been able to build up any semblance of a line. A round came from an enemy tank, broke the top of the small fir tree above Cowan's head, sending him reeling from the gun, but he jumped back and continued to fire. I knew that the big tigers had reached the junction of the fire break and the highway. Hails of enemy bullets thrashed the snow and the fir and the trees around us. The fir trees around us. I ducked beneath the cover of my foxhole trying to get battalion on the radio, but without success. I stood up and looked out of the hole. Great God, there was no one left but Cowan. The others had fallen back. I jumped from the foxhole and yelled to Cowan to withdraw. Savage and Blackburn followed me. I left my musette bag lying on the ground, but my carbine was over my shoulder. Absent-mindedly, I screamed to get the radios. Savage jumped back into the foxhole, and Blackburn and I turned and plunged through the thickly interlaced branches of the little firs. Bullets followed us, lashing the firs on all sides, and I wondered if maybe I'd been hit. I felt no pain, but I could not see how any human being could endure those hails of bullets and not be wounded. I stumbled blindly through the brush, unheedful of the branches scratching at my face and hands. My overshoes were slick, and I tripped and fell face downward in the snow. I rose again and stumbled on blindly. As we plunged through the firs, I was separated from Blackburn and the group that had held briefly at the firebreak. I did not worry that Savage or the others were not with me. They were at someplace else in the fir thicket. I came across Sergeant Albine and Sergeant Walter L. Dietrich of Cincinnati, Ohio, a machine gun squad leader. We plowed through the firs together until we came unexpectedly upon K Company CP, a series of half-completed foxholes dug in the frozen red earth. Captain Howard C. Wilson of Houston, Texas, the K Company commander, was talking frantically over his 300 radio. He turned as I approached. "Damn, but I'm glad to see you," he said. "Battalion lost contact with you, and I haven't heard anything about how your company's coming." He seemed more relieved than perturbed at seeing me, and I wondered what he thought brought me to his CP. Perhaps it was the way I stood looking at him blankly. There must have been nothing in my face to tell him that my company was no more, and that even now hordes of Germans were rushing toward us unchecked. Through my mind raced only one thought: I had failed, and failed miserably. My orders had been to hold at all costs, and I personally had failed, and because of my failure the entire battalion would be routed or annihilated. And all from a local German counterattack. I Company had fallen back, but I could not blame the men. They had given in because I had some way not led them correctly. It was I who was responsible. I would turn in my captain's bars if I ever reached the rear, or perhaps they would court-martial me. I did not care. "There's nobody on your left flank," I told Captain Wilson in a matter-of-fact voice that I hardly recognized as my own. "They just knocked the hell out of us, and the whole company's fallen back. I couldn't tell you where any of I Company is right now, except these two sergeants and myself." "Good God, what can I do, Mac?" "I don't know," I said. "You can't hold here. There's nothing on your left." And then it continues. "My platoon has fallen back," he cried. "It's those goddamn tanks." "Yeah," I said. "I had 3 rounds of bazooka ammo, and they knocked the bazooka out." "I've got 6 rounds, Captain Wilson said. 2 men grabbed a bazooka and disappeared into the underbrush in the direction of the enemy. I thought how foolish it was to think of stopping 10 Tiger tanks with 1 bazooka. The 2 soldiers returned a moment later, panting for breath. "Good God, Captain," one of them said. "The woods just a few yards away from here are full of the bastards. We better get the hell out." "That settles it. Tell your other platoons to withdraw into Creekelt and Rockershelt. Notify battalion. Tell them we're getting the hell out." We plunged again through the thick fir trees towards the rear. I heard battalion on Captain Wilson's radio telling L Company to withdraw into Rosherath before the full force of the enemy's flanking drive could hit them. We reached the edge of the patch of small firs. To our left lay the exposed highway leading up the hill into Rocherath. To our right, the corner of the fir thicket joined the corner of a patch of larger trees which extended out 200 yards up the hill. We chose the louder route without hesitation. We ran halfway through the patch of woods before we came upon a group of abandoned foxholes. Captain Wilson yelled the group to the halt. "We'll hold up here," he shouted. "We may be able to hold them up for a while some of the others get out." I could not see what good we could do from this position, but I was taking commands now, and I took cover alone in a foxhole on the edge of the woods facing the highway. It was good to let someone else do the thinking for a while, even if I disagreed with the decision. I was not afraid. Instead, I was strangely apathetic to the whole affair. The Germans were hot on our tails, so what? They'd been hot on my tail for almost as long as I could remember now, and they had cut my company to ribbons. They might as well get me, too. German infantrymen emerged from the thicket we had left such a short time before and milled around two abandoned U.S. tanks parked in the open beside the forest. A Company M machine gunner, Private First Class Jose M. Lopez of Brownsville, Texas, set up his gun beside a hole 5 feet to my rear. He opened up on the German infantry with the blast of muzzle forcing me to sink to the bottom of my hole for cover. The Germans wasted no time in returning fire, riddling the area around the machine gun and my foxhole with a burp gun and rifle fire. A Tiger tank appeared at the road junction where the battalion had been shelled the night before and fired point blank at Lopez's exposed position. The long barrel of the .88 on the tank seemed to reach half the distance from the hole to my foxhole. Lopez continued to fire. An American Jeep with 2 aide men, their red Geneva crosses painted on their helmets, tore down the highway from the direction of Rocherath toward the road junction. I held my breath. The Tiger tank would surely blast them from the road. Couldn't they see the Germans were here now? They did. With the Jeep spinning on 2 wheels, they turned around and tore back up the road. The tank did not fire. Over the noise of Lopez's machine gun, I could hear Captain Wilson shouting to withdraw into Rocherath. I wanted to obey, but I was caught in the crossfire of the heavy machine gun and the attackers. I gritted my teeth and waited for a lull in the firing. None came. I jumped from the hole and ran blindly towards the rear. Bullets snipped at my heels. The tank saw that we were running again and opened with renewed vigor. The big shells snapping the tops from the trees around us as if they were matchsticks, but I saw no one fall. Dusk was approaching, and it was difficult to see for any great distance. I could not make out the town of Rocherath that I knew was high on the hill to our left front, but we plunged blindly up the hill, following a thin hedgerow that would be scant protection against the Germans, should the Germans elect to follow us with fire. I slipped and fell face down in the snow. I cursed my slick overshoes. I rose and fell again. I found myself not caring if the Germans did fire. Snow had gotten inside my shoes and my feet were soaked. My clothes were drenched. Perspiration covered my body and my mouth was dry. I wanted a cigarette. I felt like we were helpless little bugs scurrying blindly about now that some man monster had lifted the log under which we had been hiding. I wondered if it would not be better to be killed, and perhaps that would be an end to everything. And that's the section right there that, like I said, I mean, you just can't, I couldn't skip anything in there. It's just too much stuff going on. And to hear what it's like from his perspective of being overrun. And they continue to fall back as fast as they can. And they're basically in an every man for yourself situation at this point. They finally do get back, and he ends up in sort of a compound, and he tries to find his battalion commander. And so he does. Going back to the book. We walked across the courtyard and down the dark steps of the house into the basement. A group of enlisted men were eating K rations. Colonel Tuttle was quietly talking to a group of officers. A dim candle lit the room. "Nice work, Mac," Colonel Tuttle said. I could control myself no longer. The choking sensation in my throat became racking sobs that I could not hold back. The colonel tried to comfort me, and I felt foolish and childish, but I could not stop. Someone gave me a cigarette. I held it with trembling fingers. I was suddenly conscious that Colonel Tuttle was saying something to me, but at first I could not make any sense of what he was saying. This had been no local German attack. The enemy had already broken through and taken Bulligan, catching the division quartermaster and the engineering troops unaware in the undefended town. The main supply route from Krinkelt to the rear through Bulligan had thus been severed. The 2 other battalions of our regiment had been thrown into the battle, and the division was abandoning all its gains. in the offensive to hold this critical area. Our battalion had held long enough for the 9th and 38th regiments to withdraw past the vital crossroads guarded by 2 stone farmhouses that I remembered from the trip forward. The 9th was setting up a line along our present location, and the 38th had taken over the defense of Krinkelt. There were unconfirmed rumors that this was a big German push all along the First Army front. The news stunned me. I stammered. I mean you did a good job, Mac, the colonel said. The Germans are throwing everything they've got. You held out much longer than I expected after I learned the true situation. So I had not failed, and I Company had not failed. I was almost happy that the German offensive was a large-scale one. My men had done an excellent job against heavy odds, and those who had died were not dead because of some personal failing of mine. The realization made me want to cry again. I still did not know what had happened to my company. So, like I said, this was the massive German counterattack that he happened to bear the brunt of in the beginning of the Battle of Bulge. And, you can hear clearly he just thought, it was a local little German attack and we folded. Yeah. But it was a massive German attack, and they put up an incredible resistance. So now he links up with Savage, Sergeant Savage, his senior enlisted guy. He sees him. Back to the book. Savage and I ran for each other like 2 college girls suddenly reunited. Smiles wreathed our faces. We both tried to talk at once. He had heard that I'd been killed. I had not known what had become of him. I jumped back into the foxhole after you said get the radios, he explained at length. First thing I knew, there were Germans all over the place. They made me come out and took my watch and moved me over to the highway where they had 2 other GIs. Then one of our artillery barrages started falling. The Krauts hit the dirt. I grabbed one of their burp guns and started spraying, and we ran like hell. All 3 of us got away. So that's how Savage got out of there. And a little more time passes. I began to evaluate our losses in the fierce opening day fight in the Krinkelter Wald. Initially, approximately 80 men were listed as missing, but each day brought a new list of names from the rear hospitals of men who had been wounded and evacuated or were victims of trench foot. The list of missing in action finally narrowed down to 24 men. So even though, they lost control and he didn't know where everyone was. I mean, they were just gone. He was the only guy he was alone when he came back. Or he was with 1 or 2 other guys. So that's out of 150 guys. So eventually they realize, or he comes to, there's only 24 guys that they don't know what happened to, and the rest of them got out of there. And this is what it looked like overall. Back to the book. Our battalion was awarded the Distinguished Unit Citation for its defense in the Krinkelter Wald. And a number of men in the company were awarded bronze and silver stars for gallantry, including silver stars for Lieutenant Goffingen and me. Others were posthumous awards. Private First Class Cowan, the light machine gunner who had performed his duty so faithfully and fearlessly at the firebreak, was killed in action the next day, but he received the Distinguished Service Cross that was later changed to the Medal of Honor. And Private First Class Lopez, the M Company machine gunner attached to K Company, also received the nation's highest soldier honor, the Medal of Honor. So in that one defense, these guys, 2 Medal of Honors given out unbelievably. Now, this is also kind of crazy. So you go through that, right? You go through that. You lose a bunch of guys. You barely make it out. Your company is overrun. Well, guess what? It's not over. It's not over. These guys are right back at it again, and the next thing they're at is they get tasked with doing another attack. So they do recover a little bit, but they're getting told, okay, you good? Got assembled again? Okay, we got more work for you. One of the men awoke me at 6 o'clock. I blinked my eyes several times and tried to realize where I was. The realization came, and with it, a feeling of revulsion that the war still went on, and today we would attack. I wanted to turn my face back toward the wall and sleep on. And they're planning this attack. I was too busy with the various details of the movement to think much about fear. I tried to recall the various phases of an attack that I had learned in training, but I was fully conscious of my lack of experience. So even after all this, he still doesn't feel like he's experienced enough. I looked at my watch. It was 15 minutes until 4 o'clock. The artillery barrage would begin in 5 minutes. L Company was moving into position now. The time was drawing near. Oh God, be with us on this attack. So the nerves don't go away. When we reached the railroad track, the 1st and 2nd platoons jockeyed into position in the open field. They moved quickly into an approach march formation. Small explosions that sent the snow cascading in all directions, and little black puffs of powder and noise appeared unpatterned over the field. The men fell face downward in the snow and rose again when the barrage lifted. The Germans were firing light mortars. One man from the 2nd platoon lay in a crumpled heap and did not rise. His face was buried impassively in the snow. I looked at him as I passed. He was a new man, a replacement received the week before. He was the first man from the company whom I'd seen killed. And a mixed feeling of honor and pity swept over me. And a mixed feeling of horror and pity swept over me. But there was no time to stop and think. I didn't even know the man's name. How strange is war. Some of us can go for days and weeks and months in war and never be killed or wounded, but another man is killed in his first taste of war. So as they were doing this attack, this is a little tactical advice here from Sergeant Savage. God damn it, Captain, Savage said. You got to stay further back. At least get some scouts out in front. His admonition reminded me that it was foolish for me to lead the column. The foolish days of leading one troops into battle were past, even though correspondents persisted in telling of daring generals who preceded their troops, firing from the hip or brandishing a bayonet. I had no feeling of bravado, but it seemed obvious that the woods were undefended. I dropped back to the rear of 1st Platoon. So, leadership position tactically, if you're too far forward, number one, you might get killed. Number two, you might just end up in a firefight where now you can't move and you can't make direction. You can't even talk on the radio because you're in the firefight. Fast forward in a little bit, and they're in a big firefight. A burp gun stuttered. A flood of fiery tracer bullets blazed along the trees. We fell face downward into the snow. The bullets traced a fiery path 2 feet above the ground. My men did not return fire, and I was glad. The confusion would be terrific if they opened up. The night was quiet again. I rose and motioned for Savage, Sahlberg, and Charles to follow. We had taken only a few steps when the burp gun opened up again. "I'm hit, Captain," I heard Charles scream, and he dropped into the snow. "I'm hit." I was conscious of a sudden pain in the calf of my right leg, as if someone had hit me with a giant club swung by powerful arms. I realized that I too was hit, and a sudden flood of fear engulfed me. We were 200 yards forward of any friendly troops and 800 yards inside the woods. A momentary vision of a night spent bleeding in the frozen forest swept through my mind. A warm liquid flowed over my leg and into my boot. That would be blood, I thought. "I'm hit too, Charles," I said. My leg felt numb, and I dropped to the ground. The firing ceased. Charles said he was hit through the right hip and could not walk. Savage took the battalion radio, and I designated 2 men to carry Charles. We would have to get back to 3rd Platoon now. I believed I could walk. I stood and put weight on my wounded leg. A nauseating pain swept over me, and I thought I was going to faint. But I tried keeping the leg stiff and found that I could walk. The men around us lay flat on the snow in little bunches, as if gained some solace through sharing their fears with each other. My brain was whirling. Should we continue the attack? How badly was I hurt? Had we hit a German patrol or an outpost or stumbled upon a main line of defense? I hastily decided to continue to the rear, out of the line of fire of the direct attack upon the German position from a less restricted spot. We moved toward the rear. 2 men supporting Charles with his arms about their shoulders. A sudden burst of small arms fire came from our right rear, and the woods echoed to the crack of machine gun and rifles. The fire was coming from the direction of the defensive position at the junction of the fire breaks which we had left. Bullets whined low over our heads and buried themselves into the trees and snow around us. My first thought was that K Company had contacted our rear elements and, thinking they were Germans, had opened fire. We heard battalion talking on the radio, asking K Company what time they wanted to pick up their bedrolls for the night. We've got no use for bedding rolls, K Company answered. It was Lieutenant Flame. We're in a firefight. Savage turned the butterfly switch on the radio and broke the conversation with a distressed voice. Lieutenant Flame, he cried. Lieutenant Flame, this is I Company. You're firing at us. This is Item Company. This is Item Company. God damn it. I said we're in a firefight. We can't use any bedding rolls now. Lieutenant Flame, Savage continued, this is Savage. You're firing at I Company. Make your men quit firing. You're firing at I Company. You're shooting the hell out of Item Company. The radio was silent for a moment. The hell we are. If we're firing at I Company, then why in the hell don't you quit firing back? I was frightened with the realization of what he had said. We were receiving fire from K Company, but they were not firing at us. The enemy had slipped behind us. For some unexplainable reason, my men had not opened fire in either of the directions from which the bullets came. I thank God that they had not started shooting. The confusion would have been trebled, and I could visualize GIs firing at one another in the darkness. Whew. That's the worst case scenario. You got bad guys in between you and other good guys. It's just a horrible situation. And maybe it's hard for civilians to understand this. When you're in a firefight, you're not hitting all your targets. You're shooting suppressive fire. And so if I'm shooting in one direction, the bullets are not stopping where the enemy is. They're going to keep going indefinitely, you know? So if there's friendlies behind the enemy, you basically can't shoot.
Yeah.
You basically can't shoot. So MacDonald they continue on. He continues on for a while trying to get them in a secure situation, but eventually he has to get extracted because of his wound. And he gets back. When he's now like under warm blankets and stuff, and he's in the aid station. I shuddered at the thought of the company. Where were they now? Did Brock's platoon get out? Had I done the right thing in withdrawing, or should I have stayed and fought it out? It seemed that I was always running. Perhaps it was all my fault. There had been a brief moment of exultation in the aid station when someone had reminded me that now I could get a nice rest in the hospital. But now a nausea of fear for the welfare of the company enveloped me. I felt somehow like a deserter. Yeah. You hear, we've heard plenty of stories about guys looking for the $1 million wound that's going to get them back to the States, and the $1 million wound's good for about 3 minutes, and then MacDonald says, "Hey, I feel horrible." He eventually recovers from the wound. Now you'd think, hey, the guy's done a bunch of fighting. He recovered from his wound, but he got wounded, but now he's in the rear. And so, he's probably going to get whatever, extracted, maybe moved to the States, maybe, give him a nice cushy job. No, not happening. They don't give him I Company back because I Company now has a new company commander. They give him a Company G. So now he's in Company G. And what are they doing? Are they in the rear somewhere relaxing? No, it's attack time. They're going forward. So here we go. We went back to the book. We would attack the next morning at 4:45. Someone awakened me at 3:30 the next morning. It was cold in the room, and I shivered as I climbed from my sleeping bag. My mind was dulled with sleep, and I wanted to climb back into the warm sleeping bag and sleep on and on. I wanted to scream to hell with the war and go back to sleep. The sudden jolt of awakening was like emerging from a wonderful, peaceful world into a world of forbidding reality. There would be men hurt today, perhaps killed, men from my own company. It could be me. That seemed remote and impossible, but it did not remove my fear for the others. There were many responsibilities. Had I given the platoon leaders all the information they would need? How was my attack plan? Was there some important detail I had forgotten? Would Heimbach be defended? Would our attack be discovered as we crossed the flat, open field towards the town? Oh God, if we could but rush from the house into the attack without thinking again. It was the waiting and the thinking and the wondering that got you. Talked about that before. That fear that you're feeling, it's the waiting. It's the hesitation. And he's saying, hey, if we could just go from this house that I'm sitting in right now right into the attack, that's what he'd prefer to do. But he can't. And now they're moving to the attack is full on now. The last men in the forward positions crossed the crest of the small hill. They should be almost inside the first houses of Bendorf now, I thought. I halted the CP group in a sunken trail running across the crest of the hill and told Junior to ask for reports from the assault platoon. Suddenly a tank fired from somewhere to our front and a big shell whirred low over our heads. A machine gun chattered. A round of tank fire ripped from the limb from a tree above our head. A burp gun said burp, burp. There was no question now we had hit their defenses. The Germans, too, had tanks. I was trembling slightly from the excitement, but I was not as deathly afraid as I had once been in the pillbox positions. The opinion often expressed among some GIs that after any man was wounded once, he was never any good in combat again, did not hold true in my case. I was more calm than ever before, but I was also more cautious. Now they proceed with that attack, and again, obviously, this book is just filled with tactical situation after tactical situation after lesson learned after lesson learned after tactical situation, and I'm not reading the entire book right now, but that is why you get the book, so that you can get all this information from it. I can't give it all to you on a podcast. You have to read it. But fast forwarding through that assault, back to the book, I stopped longer at the house where the men from the squad of the sergeant who had been killed were preparing for the night. I had not known the sergeant personally, but to these men he was an important character in the little war that revolved around themselves. There was an undertone of sadness as they talked, but there was no bitterness. The sergeant had died like any one of them might die at any time. There was a war on, you know. And what I like about that is he points out that, you know, from his perspective, all this stuff is going on. He realizes that these guys, that's the whole world to them, right? That sergeant that was killed, that's their guy. And their war is everything to them. And it's just like when you meet people, you know, if you're in a business and you go and meet someone on the front lines, like they don't care. I'm not saying they don't care, but they've got their whole world in what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So you got to be cognizant of that. You got to understand that. And you got to keep that perspective when you go out and talk to people. You can't be like, you know, hey, there's a lot of people that got killed today. No, it doesn't matter to these guys. There's only one guy that matters to these guys. Now, like I said, this book covers a ton of different combat. And they go, while he's in charge of G Company, they go through all these different towns. I mean, they go through the town of Hombressen and across the Weser River, and they go through Ellerhausen, and they go through Varlausen, and they go through Warminsen, and they go through Mengerhausen and Giesmar. And they're going just from city to city. They're going very quickly, and the fighting, it's becoming a little easier as they're going. The defenses, you know, the Germans are running out of people. They're running out of supplies as well. So the fighting's getting easier, but they're still meeting some hardcore defenders. And one of the things that's happened that's really horrible is the Germans now are using anti-aircraft weapons against the ground troops. So anti-aircraft weapons make flak. They go up in the air and they explode. And they're now using those against the ground troops. And the way that these rounds are coming in and exploding above them, it's a nightmare. And it's really hard for them to fight. So they've got some good efforts going on to go and take out these anti-aircraft weapons. And one of the groups of anti-aircraft weapons that they take out, they finally take out these anti-aircraft weapons through an assault. And when they get done with the assault, MacDonald comes up on the position. And here we go back to the book. Sergeant Patton said the Germans manning the position in the field which held them up were bastards. They had 2 AA guns, he said. Some of them wanted to surrender, but every time a Kraut would jump out of his hole to surrender, some other Kraut SOB would shoot him right in the back. Counting the ones they killed and the ones we got too, there's 19 dead. Patton had 1 man slightly wounded in the arm, but he had already walked back to Geismar to the aid station. My weapons platoon and platoon of heavy machine guns from H Company arrived from their supporting position outside Geismar. Sergeant Mitchell was killed, one of the sergeants from the heavy machine gun told me. I could not think of for a moment who Sergeant Mitchell was. Then I remembered he was the pleasant, perennial, cheerful tech sergeant in command of the platoon who was to receive his commission as a second lieutenant in a few days. An anti-aircraft gun fired from the woods to the south, the sergeant continued, and Sergeant Mitchell got hit. He was unconscious, and the aid man took him back to one of the TDs to give him first aid. TD is a tank destroyer. It's like another tank, but they're specifically meant to fight other tanks. The aircraft gun fired again, and the goddamn TD backed up. Ran right over Sergeant Mitchell. So that's another thing that you have to train for, is when you're working with armor, when you're working with tanks, they don't know what's going on around them. They don't have like rear view backup cameras. And so if you get in the way of a tank, it's going to run you over. And so that's something that we were lucky when before we went on deployment, we'd go work with tanks a little bit, and that's where we'd learn that lesson. Because you might think, I'll take cover behind this tank. That tank could move at any moment. So you got to be very careful of that, young troopers out there. If you don't work with tanks often, stay out of their way. Here's as they're continuing to press through and press through and press through from village to village, from town to town. And again, they're moving pretty rapidly now. Back to the book. Colonel Smith rolled up beside my tank in his Jeep. Nice going, Mac, he said. You're doing a really swell job. Just keep them moving. The faster, the better. Don't thank me, Colonel, I said, meaning it and disgusted that it sounded melodramatic. Thank Lieutenant Bagby and the 1st Platoon. I'm just tagging along. So you got a leader there that's not looking to grab all the credit himself, but give it to his troops. Now, like I said, the fighting continues to get easier and easier, and they're starting to see, people surrender. They're also starting to see like young kids, because you're starting to see the Hitler Youth that are being recruited. They're 13 years old, 14 years old, kids that are surrendering. They fight through Corbetha and Lopitz and Kriegsdorf, and I apologize for my lack of German speaking capability. But they get into one town, and one of the lieutenants, Lieutenant Whitman, kind of pushes into the town with a small team, and he's in there. He's in one of the buildings, and all of a sudden, like a massive group of German soldiers comes in, and they're kind of stuck there. So here we go, back to the book. Lieutenant Whitman called suddenly over the radio, and I knew by the excitement in his voice that something had either happened or was about to happen. You better get somebody else up here to help us out. Sounds like a whole regiment of Krauts coming this way up the highway. So he's trying to figure out what's happening, and then the radio sputtered. Hello, G6. This is Whit. So G6 is the call sign for MacDonald's. Hello, G6. This is Whit. For God's sake, get someone up here to help. There's Germans all over the goddamn place. I grasped the speaker from Wes Miller's outstretched hand. Whit, this is Mac, I said. They caught us halfway across the open field. The men have taken off. I'll have to go back and get them to come up. Over. For God's sake, get us some help quick. We're completely surrounded. Roger. Out. So now Whitman's in one of these buildings, completely surrounded. This continues on. The battalion radio was silent. I called for Lieutenant Whitman, and his voice came through weakly, as though he were speaking in a stage whisper. I'm back on the left side of the highway, he said, in a house. I've got 9 men with me. Germans are running all around all over the place. I lost track of all the other men, heard some of them surrendering. Get us some help quick, or they'll find out where we are when they start searching the houses. So MacDonald tries to, calls battalion, hey, we need some help here. No, you don't get any help. And so he tells Whitman, or Whitman hears it on the radio, that he's not going to get any help, he's not going to get any support. And this is what Whitman says: there's only one thing to do then, he continued. If we have to wait that long, they're sure to find us. We'll go down to the cellar and you start plastering us with artillery fire. We're inside and the Krauts are out in the open. We'll help you direct fire from here. I knew his decision called for a generous amount of fortitude, even though he would be partially protected in the cellar. Lieutenant Reed set up his artillery radio, and artillery gave us a priority mission. Sergeant Barnes arrived with his platoon and the machine gun section. I sent them into position along with a platoon of heavy machine guns from H Company. To hell with the ammunition, I said. We'll get more from somewhere. Spray the hell out of the whole area. The machine guns opened up and artillery whistled overhead, thundering into the open field dangerously close to the paling fence at the end of the garden. 300 short, Lieutenant Reed yelled into his radio. 300 short. The artillery whistled overhead again and plummeted into the houses beyond us with a terrific roar. Orange flames lit the darkness like flashes of lightning. That's right on top of us, Whitman cried, delighted. Let her go again. We can hear Germans running all over the place outside. Lieutenant Reed called for barrage after barrage, and the big shells roared into the objective. The Germans made feeble efforts at retaliation with their machine guns, but the shots died away in the explosion of the big artillery shells. A direct hit transformed a house into a mass of roaring flames. Is that your house? I asked Whitman, half fearfully. No, seems to be on our left, he answered. Give us another volley in the same place. Sounds like a tank or some kind of armored car pulled up. Lieutenant Reed called for a repeat volley. That hit just right, Whitman said, his voice scarcely audible over the radio. I wondered what had happened to his radio and was afraid that perhaps the batteries were going dead and we would lose our only means of communication. I can't talk loud, he said. I've got 15 Kraut prisoners down here in the cellar with me, and some Germans have come in upstairs. We can hear them walking around. If one of these prisoners so much as opens his mouth, I'll plug him. So there's another situation where you're calling in artillery to your position. You just happen to be in the cellar of a house. Crazy. Here, they're doing a little assault, and it's set up like a frontal assault, but he wants to make a little adjustment here. The obvious solution to being unable to advance frontally against the unseen enemy was to send a flanking platoon around to the right, having them enter the woods and come in on the defenders from the flank and rear, but I balked at the thought of sending one platoon such a great distance when, for all I knew, the woods beyond the canals might be thick with enemy. I decided to cover our front with artillery and have two platoons try to advance frontally, and notified second and third platoons to be ready to move forward under cover of artillery barrage. But the enemy came suddenly to life when the riflemen rose to go forward and repulsed 3 efforts to advance. So he wants to flank, but he's weighing it in his head. The flanking positions through the woods. In order to flank, he needs to put his guys through the woods, through an area he doesn't know how well it's defended. So he says, you know what, instead of doing a flank, which is what I want to do, I'm just going to put down some artillery fire and we're going to do a frontal assault. They get shut down, and eventually he does make the decision, you know what, the decision now becomes, okay, frontal assault is not going to work. Now I'm going to have to flank. He goes back to that flank. I sent Whitman with a spare 300 radio and ordered him across the canal. He moved out quickly, and far to the right I could see his men emerge from the woods and wade across the first canal, the water coming to the necks of the shorter men. My fear of a larger enemy force in the woods overcame my fear for safety of our left flank, and I ordered Lieutenant Bagby's platoon to follow the flanking force. We could see the little dots that were Whitman's men emerge from the wood line and double time towards the garden. Lieutenant Reed stopped the artillery fire. The third platoon to my front began to advance, and I knew it was only a matter of minutes until the objective would be ours. I signaled the CP group, and we moved to the railroad tracks on toward the bridge, past 3 wounded Germans lying helplessly in the gully beside the tracks where Barnes' men had evidently shot them earlier in the day. The enemy automatic weapon suddenly opened up again at the third platoon, but the men were close enough now to pick up the bush from which it was firing. They fired round after round into the clump of bushes, and the weapon was silent. So eventually he gets his flank on, and that's what wins the day. Now, again, a lot is covered as they do this city by city. Some of the villages, some of the towns that they enter, there's no resistance. Some of them, there is massive resistance. They push through it. They fight through it. Lots of lessons learned. Lots of incredible heroics. And eventually, they push through and they make it all the way into Czechoslovakia. And we're now approaching the end, not only for MacDonald, but the end for the war, as they go in to liberate Czechoslovakia. Going back to the book, our column continued forward, and my company shifted to the lead position on the tanks. I rode behind the lead tank in the artillery jeep. The little country towns changed into small industrial towns, and we began to notice a scattering of red, white, and blue Czechoslovakian flags in towns in place of the usual white flags of surrender. Civilians waved at us guardedly from behind closed windows. The scattering of Czech flags should have warned us, but we were totally unprepared for the mad celebration which greeted us in the next town. We had suddenly crossed from the Sudetenland into Czechoslovakia proper. The houses were a riot of color with red, white, and blue Czechoslovakian flags. Civilians lined the streets 10 deep, cheering and waving their flags as if their lives depended on it. Our column was forced to slow down, and the happy civilians pushed into the street and showered us with flowers and cakes and cookies. One old woman thrust a baked chicken into our jeep. Another old woman stood beside the road, waving both hands in the air, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. Little children were wild with joy. Some of them had never known anything but 6 years of Nazi occupation. The young men wore red, white, and blue armbands and carried German weapons, a part of the underground movement that was even now struggling against superior German forces in the capital city of Prague. Everyone was screaming the Czech words, "Nazdar, Nazdar," and we wondered what they meant. I looked up and down the column at the soldiers in the company. Brilliant smiles wreathed their faces, and they waved cheerfully at the shouting crowds as if they had just won an election campaign and this was a personal triumph. Hardened, stubble-faced veterans had unshamed tears in their eyes. The unleashed joy of these oppressed people knew no bounds, and it was too much for us. Suddenly, I began to realize what no one thus far had been able in the war to put into words. What we were fighting for. And I found a lump in my throat, which I could not swallow. Freedom. Freedom. Something we take for granted. Back to the book. The news came by radio that the war was over. There was no defining our joy. Sergeant Quinn brought out a treasured keg of cognac. The next day, May 8th, would be VE Day. The townspeople held a dance for us the next night in the town guest house. One of the artillerymen was escorting a young girl whom he had met the night before, and she told him that her friend, Lieb, would like very much to attend with the captain. The small guest house was crowded with dancers, and the older men and women sat with the young children at tables around the sides of the room. The male dancers were predominantly GIs, but a few Czech young men were present. The orchestra reminded me of the circus bands in the U.S. as they played the waltzes, the polkas. The Czechs would join in often to sing the songs enthusiastically even as they danced. At the insistence of the band leader, Lieb agreed to sing, and the notes came forth in a clear, sparkling soprano. When she had finished, she made a brief speech, which the Slavic-speaking soldier told me said that the people would now sing their national anthem. It would be the first time they had sung it in public in 6 years. The people rose as one, and every boy, girl, man, and woman joined in the singing with clear, lusty voices that made goose pimples rise on my arms. Some of the older people cried, and it was all I could do to keep the tears from my eyes. When it was over, the soldiers began to cry, "Speech! Speech!" And the civilians caught on and applauded. I stood up on a chair in the center of the room, trying to think of something to say. I mumbled a few words of sincere gratitude for the wonderful reception these wonderful people had given us, and a soldier translated for Lieb, and she told the people what I had said. They applauded warmly. Lieb and I walked outside into the cool night air. In the distance, we could see fireworks exploding in the air above Pilsen, and we knew that they too were celebrating VE Day. I looked around me and saw light streaming from the windows, and army vehicles driving on the highway with their headlights on, and I heard the gay music and laughter from the dance in the background. I suddenly realized that I could light a cigarette once again in the open and not be afraid of drawing enemy fire. And I did. It was a simple thing, but it gave me a wonderful feeling that life was worth living again. I put my arm about Lieb's waist, and she pointed to the multicolored fireworks display and laughed. "Dobry, Dobry." I had learned that Dobry was good. And I said, "Dobry, Dobry." I looked away in the distance, and I seemed to see the faces of the men from companies I and G who could not see this great day because they had died to obtain it. And then their faces were gone, and I saw the mud and ice and snow of the Siegfried line, and the exploding fireworks became bursting artillery shells in the Ardennes and bursting flak at Lipez. But then, the terror was gone, and I saw 2 companies of men marching by, and there was I Company and G Company, tired, dirty, weary, but with smiling faces. And somehow, the faces of the men who had been killed were in the background, smiling and waving bravely to those who marched on. And Lieb looked up at me as if to ask what I was thinking, and I said, "Dobry, Dobry." And Lieb squeezed my hand and laughed. Yes, Dobry. And that is the end of my story. But perhaps you would like to know that my company moved on 5 miles north of Pilsen to Tremonza. And there we met another group of dirty, tired infantrymen who called themselves Russians. A month later, we were loaded on a big boat at Le Havre, and on July 20th, 1945, we sailed into New York Harbor and received the cheers of a grateful America, and saw a tall lady with a torch that brought tears to our eyes. The characters in my story were destined to be sent to help to finish another war in another part of the world where another group of American infantrymen were fighting a dirty, miserable war. But a miracle happened, and the other war came to an end. Most of my characters are wearing civilian clothes again now. But I know that wherever they are, they will have a hollow place in their hearts for those who will not be changing into civilian clothes again, ever. Those GIs who, that others may live, were cut down in a harvest for the devil. And that is how this book wraps up. An incredible book. Again, it's called Company Commander by Charles B. MacDonald. And although that is the end of this book, let it not be the end of our memory. And let us not forget these lessons, and let us not forget the tyranny and the oppression that was forced onto millions and millions of people. And let us not forget the millions and millions and millions of innocent people murdered, butchered, frozen, starved, wasted human lives to satisfy the twisted ego of a few. And let us never forget these men that fought hunger and fatigue and fear to face and to fight evil. And let us not forget those that sacrificed their youth and their health for the youth and the health of others. And finally, let us never, ever forget those men and women who were cut down in this harvest for the devil to give other human beings the most precious gift in the world. Freedom. Let us never forget them or this gift. Freedom. And I think that's all I've got for tonight. Echo Charles, if you want to maybe take a minute here and explain, give me a chance to decompress over here, and maybe you can explain in the meantime if somebody wants to support this particular podcast.
Sure.
How they could do that.
It's crazy. These books don't, like the effect of, and obviously you didn't read the whole book, but just what you read, like the way it affects you, you know, it takes you there. And just even like at the end when it's like the war was over, you feel, you're like, oh my gosh, thank God that's over kind of thing. You have that feeling and it just never wears off. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I've said before, you know, when we started and I wasn't sure if I would have enough books, right?
Yeah.
But we're going to have enough books.
I know, man.
And every single one of these stories is its own incredible story. And and because what we just talked about, how you get this war, World War II, for this guy was this here. But you know, you get someone that's in the Pacific and you take one, if you were to take one of his platoon commanders, it would be that war. Yeah. It's these little tiny human experiences that are so incredible, and each one of them is just as incredible as the next one, is just as incredible as the previous one. And that's why I just don't know if we'll ever get to them all. And the other thing is that we have to remember is a tiny, 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 minuscule percentage of these people actually wrote a book.
Yeah.
Most of these stories, they just happened.
Yeah.
And we don't know about them.
Yeah. It's so crazy. And each one is so unique in their little perspective, but at the same time it has so many similarities, you know, and it all sort of like, as you gather, you know, one story, two stories, all these different, it starts to tell this overall tale, you know.
It's the tale of humans. It's the tale of human nature. It's the tale of overcoming, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just the things that these guys overcome. You take all these things. You know, I've been in some miserable places, right, in my time, right? I mean, basically everybody has. You've been in some hard places in your life. And then these guys, they do that. And they live that way. And then they get attacked. And then they lose guys. And they get wounded. And then they just go right back out. Right back onto the front. Yeah. The limits of human nature are the limits of the capacity of human beings to overcome obstacles is unbelievable. And if there's nothing else, like I know not everyone goes to war, and not everyone should go to war, and I don't want anyone to go to war if you can help it. Mm-hmm. But if at least we learn that whatever we're coming up against, man, we can deal with it. We can do so much more and be so much more uncomfortable and push yourself so much harder. You know, that was one thing, and I didn't do a good job today of portraying it, but he's getting pushed in a lot of these situations. I mean, you can kind of hear it when he's getting woken up. Every time he wakes up, his initial reaction isn't cool, I get to go fight now. No, his initial reaction every single time is like, I want to go back to bed. I want the war to be over. I want to hide. That's his reaction every single time. And yet, every single time, he gets up and he does his job. He does his duty and he does what he has to do. That's the human spirit, right? Yeah. That's the thing that we should all capture. I mean, we have a hard time getting out of bed because it's going to be a tough workout, or because we're going to have a hard day at the office. You know, it's like we're pathetic. We're pathetic. Compared to these guys that are, what's waking you up? Mortar fire, machine gun fire, people screaming that they're being overrun. That's your wake up call. I think we can get out of bed in the morning because we're facing a tough workout or a hard day, or we got to get up early for travel, or whatever situation you're in. Mm-hmm. You can do it. I can do it. We can do it. Look at what these guys went up against day after day after day after day after day after day after day. Just doesn't stop. It just doesn't stop. And the whole time, by the way, there's the threat of death. By the way, the whole time.
Freezing.
You know, I just thought about this. Like, this is a book where he doesn't even talk about, like, his family.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk about his loved ones. No, he's there. He's just, like, detached from everything else. He's got a war to fight. So, thankfully, we get these incredible memoirs. This one here, if you're looking at it on YouTube, holding up the cover, I got the old school version. It has illustrations in it. Got some cool ink drawings of, it's all of weapons, just to kind of let you know what these things look like. But incredible stuff.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, support, right? If you're in the mood.
Yeah. Like, for instance, how much effort does it take to click through Amazon? It doesn't take a lot of effort. You can do it if you want to support you.
Yeah, if you want to support in that way. Actually, let me go ahead and explain that. The Amazon thing is cool. So, you do your Amazon shopping like we always do, daily, for some of us. Instead of going straight to Amazon, just go to JockoPodcast.com. Little Amazon banner on the side. You kind of got to scroll down if you want to hit the banner sometimes. But I put it up in the top menu as well. Boom. Click on the Amazon banner, then do your shopping. Good way to support. Like Jocko said, just little action. We can do that if you want. If that's what you're doing, if you're supporting the podcast, boom, that's a good way.
Are we asking them to assault a target? Are we asking them to flank an enemy? Are we asking them to come up against Panzer tanks or Tiger tanks with one bazooka and 10 tanks? No. Just asking for a little support.
Right. And it's a good way too. It's a really good way. Well, I was going to make the comparison to the plane that comes in and then leaves, But meanwhile, it's huge support. But
that's true.
Let's face it, though, those pilots, that's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I don't know if that's a fair comparison. But nonetheless,
let's stick with sodium on that one.
Yeah. It's like sodium, little piece of sodium. Throw it in the fish tank.
You know what? We should actually do that.
Yeah.
We need to do it, actually. We need to do Facebook Live. We need to get some sodium and put it in a bucket of water so we can give visuals behind the situation that you're talking about.
Yeah, we'll do it at your house.
Okay, bring it.
Where do you get sodium, though?
I don't know.
Like CVS?
You're the logistics guy. Go get some sodium.
Look into that one. Anyway, that is a more fair analogy. You're the sodium big reinforcement effects with the Amazon click-through situation. Also, if you're into supplementation, which I'm going to go ahead and recommend it now. Catch me 3 years ago, you're not going to hear me recommending any supplements. Maybe a pre-workout, maybe. And even then, it's like caffeinated. I was thinking, so Onnit, right? That's the supplements we're talking about, if you didn't know. If you did know, this is all familiar to you. But the pre-workout that we talk about, it's called Total Strength and Performance. Weightlifting and whatnot. It's pre-workout. It's stimulant-free, right? So you know what I was thinking? I was like, hey, stimulant-free pre-workout is kind of different than what I'm used to. But you know what it's like?
I don't, but I've got a feeling I'm going to learn real quick.
This is what it's like. It's like you ever watch movies and the good guy, like, I don't know, Clint Eastwood, Bruce Willis, like, he's all calm. He's like, he's not wired enough. He's all calm.
I see what you're saying here.
But when it goes down, bro, he kills, kicks ass. That's what this pre-workout is kind of like. Like when you take it, you're like, oh, I'm calm. But on the inside, so much potential. And then when you get the work going, it's like, boom. So they do studies on it. That's actually one of the good parts about it. It's like they do real, like placebo tested, like that's studies.
Double-blind placebo tested and stuff like that.
Yeah, sounds cool, but it is cool. So with this pre-workout one, it's like over... I think it was like a 4-week period. It's like, I want to say 6% improvement. On average, about there. Right. And I'm thinking, 6%. I was like, okay, cool. Single-digit percent. Sometimes that can mean a lot. So I'm like thinking, okay, what's 6%? What does that look like? So I'm thinking.
Add that to your bench press number or whatever.
How about
Add that to your deadlift number.
How about this? Subtract it. Ooh. So this is how it really hit me.
Why you got to be negative?
I know, bro, because I'm trying to prove a legitimate point. Okay, so let's say I'm doing some dumbbells, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a set of 10. I don't know. I'm not saying me. I'm just saying anyone. And I'm going to use the 100-pound dumbbells. I'm going to do 10 of them.
Curls?
Right? How about this? We'll do a bench press dumbbells. I'm going to do hundreds. And 1 week I do, a set of 10. Boom, solid, right? And then whatever, I finish my workout. The next week, if I can do 6% less, like that's my limit. I'm feeling 6% weaker. Yeah. I can't do those hundreds 10 times.
No.
I got to go to the 95s. Oof. Bro, you know how whack that is?
It's real whack.
So I'm saying if you don't take this pre-workout over a month period of time, this is just on average. If you don't take this pre-workout, you're the guy who did the 95s. Mm-hmm. If you do, you're the guy who did the hundreds. Actually, it's less than 95s, really. It's like 94s. Really? On average, dang. See, so that's what, if you're not taking the pre-workout, which I do now, by the way, if you're not taking it, you're that guy. No, that's cool, but I'm just saying you're missing out on gains galore, You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyway, and this is all proven stuff. This is just me making it up. This is like prove they did it. Florida State University.
And against placebo. You prove it yourself.
Yeah, that part is up to you. It's up to you to go get after it.
No, but what about you personally?
Yeah, I'm all upon it. I didn't measure my results or nothing like that. I didn't do a double blind.
Mentally?
Yeah, the pop. Remember?
Oh, that's right.
Pop is real. How they did it is, even the word double blind placebo situation,
right?
Whatever. Like a lot of people, they don't know what that is. What it is they get a group of people who are going to work out hard, going for gains straight up. They're going to give them all the supplement. All of them, all the people they're going to give the supplement. But half of those people, it's actually not the supplement. It's like nothing. But they don't know that. Everyone thinks they're taking the supplement. So they're all getting after it. They're all, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they say, okay, whose gains are better? And they monitor, and all the people with the supplements, their gains were, on average, and it's all these different lifts, bench, squat, all this stuff. So boom, proven, boom. Anyway.
It tastes good. That much I can actually attest to.
It does. I was thinking about that.
I can attest that it makes. Now I can't. I haven't done a double blind placebo on myself.
Me neither.
Because I'd have to like mix it up and fake myself out, and I'm pretty hard to trick.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah.
So,
hard.
But like I said, when I feel the need, I take not only Shroom Tech Sport but also the pre.
Yeah.
And get after it.
Yeah.
If I know that the boys are waiting for me for the jiu-jitsu training, and I know it's going down, I will. If I'm feeling any sort of hesitation, I'll get after that.
Default aggressive. When in doubt, do that. And it makes sense too, because obviously jiu-jitsu, especially when you're going hard, that's a workout that you need to recover from, and you'll be, so you'll get better results from recovering from even a jiu-jitsu workout.
Yeah.
I
just worry about performance.
Yeah, performance.
I'm not doing it for recovery, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
With the jiu-jitsu workout.
But like it or not, that's what you're getting.
I'm getting it.
You're
It's
getting
a
the
bonus.
recovery too. Yeah, fully is. But yeah, so good. Yeah, and you say it tastes good. It does taste good. It was weird because as far as pre-workouts go, like if you get a regular, quote-unquote, regular pre-workout, they try to make it taste like candy and Kool-Aid and lemonade and all this stuff, and I'm not mad at it. It tastes good or whatever.
I'm mad at it.
But yeah, man, let's face it. I mean, it's not that good. So when I took this one, it was it had more of like a, like if you take like natural greens or something, it kind of has like
that. Yeah.
Earthy. It's earthy. There's an earthy flavor to it, which I was like, oh, this is different. It's not like candy. And I was like, okay. And then after a while, you kind of get used to it. And then you have that, you have that association to certain tastes from like, then you go work out, you get the pop, and it's like kind of part of the routine. And so it's like, tastes all good now. You know what I mean? It's like through association. Yeah, it's good. Anyway, it doesn't taste like krill oil. Like if you're chomping krill oil tablets, you got to just swallow those. Yeah. Don't chomp those.
Those do not taste good.
Yeah. And krill oil, speaking of which, is the go-to, in my opinion.
It's the go-to.
I was talking to Greg Train about this. What's today? It was yesterday I was talking to him. And of course, like, okay, if you're working out and you're like, hey, my joints are less sore, that's good. Of course. But when you do notice it, and in my experience, even more, if you pay attention, is like, for example, like, a few days ago, I'm sitting down in the living room with the kids. We're sitting there for a long time, same position, like for 45 minutes. Usually after 45 minutes, and then it's okay, it's time to get up. Whatever, you gotta do something. You get up and you're like, you get up, and you make that noise. Huh? Me, no, but if I didn't take krill oil, I probably would have that, and I have had that, especially if you've worked out that day or something like that. You just stiffen up. I'm just saying. And you feel it. With the krill oil, it's almost like you're always warm, Not warm physically, but, like you already warmed up. That's kind of what you feel like.
It's good. I'm a supporter.
Yeah. So I'm saying get on the krill oil.
Yeah. Like I said, I had injuries, and krill oil, that was a long time ago that I started taking krill oil, and I haven't stopped, and I'm not going to.
Yeah. Yeah, because even like you say injuries, which, of course, legitimate, but I've had injuries, but it more helps like the pre-injury, it's something that's not an injury. Yeah, something that's just kind of just nagging you, stuff you got to like battle through or something like that. You don't have to battle through that anymore. You got omega-3s. Next time I'll go into the whole why fish oil or krill oil is better than fish oil, because we talked about it. It'll take too long. It's kind of technical. I'll put it into like layman's terms some other time. Anyway, krill oil is dope. Pre-workout's dope. Everything on Onnit is good, actually. It just depends on what kind of workout program, what kind of lifestyle, But they have something for everybody, like regardless of what you do. Even the krill oil, even if you're not that active, it's just good for your joints, As like, because over time you degenerate, whatever. Krill oil, regenerate. Also, another way to support is subscribe on iTunes or the various podcast platforms, Stitcher, Google Play, all these things. If you subscribe, if you haven't already, that's a good support, Get updates when new episodes come out. Also on YouTube, we have a YouTube channel, excerpts on there, along with the video version of this podcast, which helps.
If you need to know what Echo looks like, because apparently Echo does not look like what he sounds like.
Yeah.
I've been told.
Actually, how's this? So, Paul, my new friend Paul, came in from Arizona, visited, came to the Victory, looked into some jiu-jitsu, all that.
I was out of town.
You were out of town. Yeah, it's too bad. So he says, when I walked in, he's like, hey, Echo. I was like, cool. I was like, hey, what's up? And he goes, oh, for some reason, I thought you'd be bigger, he said. I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, because typically people, if they haven't seen me or whatever, they think I'm smaller. And you think I'm bigger. So it's kind of, it's just different.
You probably got that impression from reading on social media that Echo's jacked.
Maybe.
People go, Echo's jacked.
Or maybe. Maybe he thought I was just tall, like super tall or something.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe. But what are you, 5'11"?
6'11". Super tall. I'm normal height. I don't know. Either way, what was the point there? If you want to watch YouTube videos of Jocko. Yeah, it's less about me, I think.
No, it's
It's about me, a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So either of us. And you want to watch the video version, go ahead, watch that, man. It's good. It's on YouTube. And also, I'll put some excerpts on there, just in case you don't want to watch the whole, because to sit in front of the computer and watch like for 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes, I mean, that's kind of unrealistic. Unless you're playing it.
A lot of people do it.
Yeah, well, no, what, and I've done this before too, you just put it on like your TV, your smart TV.
But sometimes I want to see what is going on in the podcast. I want to see the look on my own face or on your face when I say something. I kind of want to see what that looks like. So.
Yeah, and that makes sense because when you figure, I mean, I feel like a lot of people watch less TV, but that could be just my little bubble. But
no one watches TV.
Oh yeah, no one at all. No, but think
Other
about
than
this.
Hawaii 5-0.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure. But let's say you watch, I don't know, Dr. Phil. Not that I watch Dr. Phil, but if you watch, that's all they're doing. They're sitting, this guy's talking to this person, and you're just watching it.
You could listen to that, you're saying.
I'm just saying, if you're into Dr. Phil, the difference between looking and watching it and just listening to it, like, you understand that people actually do watch two people talk about stuff. It makes sense. Mm-hmm. You kind of feel like you'd be more in the conversation in a way. I don't know. Either way, YouTube. That's the point there. If you want to watch this podcast or just the excerpts, and you don't want to watch the whole podcast, there's little excerpts, little lessons that I kind of separate from the podcast, put them on there, shareable, little nuggets. Also, we have a store, JockoStore.com. If you like shirts and whatnot, new designs. I don't know, a week. Next week we'll have them, I think.
New designs.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, kind of listen to the crowd a little bit. You know, people throw out suggestions all the time, which, we listen to for sure. And kind of the ones that, I hate using the word.
The ones that percolate to the top.
I like the word percolate better than resonate. The ones that resonate with my soul. You know, that feeling. That's what the feeling I get when
so you can use
when
percolate.
I say it. When other people say it, it sounds cool.
I just say the ones that are good.
Yeah, that makes more sense. For sure. All right, yeah, the ones that we thought are good, we'll put them. We're starting to develop more and more designs and have them. So yeah, JockoStore.com, and then women's stuff is on there. Some patches, some shirts, of course, rash guards.
See, this is the thing. See, I'm not good at recognizing like, hey, we should make more stuff, because it's hard for me to recognize what's good and what's bad because my mind is different than some people's.
Yeah.
So, but what's cool is when I do see something and I do think it's good, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. And by the way, I'm almost done with the Echo Charles t-shirt design, by the way.
Yeah.
Which I think people are going to like. And you know why they're going to like it?
Because you designed it.
Well, yeah, but that's not why. They're going to like it because it's not just straightforward. Right.
Let me guess.
You can guess it.
Some layers
There's
on
some layers there on that one.
Yeah, no, I believe, Bray, you're the original layer creator, really, when it comes down to it. And no, I think that is
It
kind
was
of
funny. So speaking of layers, the day that Echo asked me what font it was that I used to write Jocko Podcast, and I was like, yeah, it's OCR standard. And then he kind of looked at me and I said, it's because it's a machine can read it. And, this is like part machine here. And he was all excited with the layers right there.
I'm telling you, the layers are real, and I respect them.
Good.
So yeah, there it is, JockoStore. Also, oh yeah, sorry, there's rash guards on there. Alleged 19%, straight up 19% increase, improvement, performance, results, all that stuff. Hoodies on there too, and like I said, more stuff. We have a travel mug coming out. That one's gonna be good. We'll let you know when that's out. Psychological warfare. I feel like I should talk about that right now.
I feel like we can't stop you, so yeah. I guess you might as well go for it.
You can't stop me. So Psychological Warfare on iTunes is an album with tracks. And this is what it's for. It's not music.
No.
This is what it's for. Technically, it's considered spoken word. This is what it is. If you're feeling a moment of weakness in your discourse, did I use that word right? Your discourse?
Not really.
Yeah, so in your course, I don't know.
It's better, closer, warmer.
In your journey, in your ambitious goals to stay on the program in whatever capacity.
Right.
Wake up early, get the workout in, hard workout in. Create, write your book, your blog, anything you're doing, right? More or less. And you're feeling moments of weakness. You're slipping from the path. You're taking a break when you shouldn't be taking a break. Scheduling unscheduled rest days.
Not good.
Yeah, when you're feeling like that.
Straying from the warpath.
Yeah. You listen to one of these designated tracks, and it'll help you get past that weakness in that moment. I would say, and I've said this before, this is my guess, 100% chance that it'll get you through your weakness. 100% chance. And this is why I say that, and I've said this before, but I think it's worth saying again. Because if you, let's say, let's do the workout one. That's the most common one to me. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to work. I don't feel like working out. And I'm saying, okay, well, I'm going to put in workout track, whatever, with the one. I listen to it, and after I'm done listening to it, it's like 2 minutes long, and I still skip the workout, that's like a shame. That's an unbearable shame, and it's all personal.
So that means it's not 100% if you still skip the workout.
I'm just trying to imagine if that were to happen. I've never done it, and the shame, the unbearable shame is so unbearable that it just simply wouldn't happen, So that's why I say 100% chance. I can't imagine a person that would actually let that happen. Nonetheless, so whatever you think your weakness is, waking up early, all this stuff. If you do the wake up early one and you set it as your alarm, which is a good idea, by the way.
Yeah,
it's actually the perfect idea.
Yeah,
just clear it with your spouse,
significant other.
Yeah, if they're sleeping in the same bed or whatever, and they have the potential to hear it.
There's some dude in the bedroom.
Yeah, just like all of a sudden starts talking, and it's Jocko. It's like a spot, It's good. Psychological Warfare, iTunes. Jocko Willink. It's also on Amazon Music and all these other things. So, yeah, it's there. It's a good way to support. And support yourself. Cause that one's a support yourself situation. For sure.
Mm-hmm. And actually, what's cool right now, we're getting requests for Psychological Warfare 2. What topics need to be covered that I didn't cover on the first one.
Yeah.
So there's more weaknesses out there in the world. Weaknesses that are creeping around. And they're trying to get people. But... yeah, we're gonna find some of them weaknesses and we're gonna smash them. So yeah, if you got any more suggestions, just hit it up.
Quitting smoking. How about that one? Right,
that's a good one. Do people still smoke?
Bro, I was thinking about that.
We live in California. That's one of the things.
Yeah, we live in a
California.
bubble.
In California, a lot of people don't smoke anymore.
Yeah,
it's not real popular out here anymore.
Yeah, so just like, bro, I'm telling you, we live in a bubble. Not only being in California, but just think about the people you hang around with. It's like all that
jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, Navy SEALs, jiu-jitsu guys who, at the very least, have like
some level of health
fitness.
consciousness.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, it's weird. I saw a guy smoking in his car, and I was like, I asked the same thing. I was like, dang, I didn't know really people smoked anymore. Really?
Well, I realized that when I go to another state.
Yes.
And you go into a restaurant or something, because it's illegal here. You can't smoke in a restaurant. You can't smoke in a bar here. You can't do it. It's illegal. Yeah. It's literally illegal.
Yeah.
So yeah, you go to another state and you smell cigarettes. And you go, oh yeah, I remember that back in.
But yeah, that'd be a good one, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll think about that one.
Like a craving.
Yeah. I don't know if I could legally do it though, because I didn't smoke and I don't know what it takes. I don't know if it's proper for me to do that. I mean, I guess I could just get nuts on smoking.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's a horrible thing that kills you.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be doing it.
Man,
There's actually no benefit from it, right? There's no. I mean, if you're doing steroids, there's some benefit to it, right? You're going to get stronger. If you're doing caffeine, you're going to be more awake. So there's certain benefits. Is there any benefits to smoking?
It depends on what you mean by benefits.
Did you ever smoke before?
I've never even tried a puff of a cigarette before.
Because you're from Hawaii.
Well, that's not the reason.
You're an athlete.
People smoke. No, it was the thing. It was the thing with my dad. He'd literally refer to it as the devil. Like he'd be like, "Smoke is the devil," and it was a shame thing too. So the way he would talk about smoking, not necessarily the people that smoke, but just smoking. It's just so. It just, to me, in my mind, according to his little
that's cool
message.
So your dad done a good job there.
Yeah. I never tried. Yeah. Anyway.
He should have told you sleep was the devil too. Get you out of the bed in the morning.
But sleep's not the devil. That's the thing.
I know.
But yeah, I think it's there is benefits though. Depends on what you mean by benefits. Depends on what you mean by benefits though.
Health benefits of any kind?
It gives you like this like buzz and alertness. But here's the thing about it's weird because if you say smoking cigarettes, there's nicotine in it and there's benefits in nicotine. But smoking also has all the carbon monoxide, like tar, all these like carcinogens and stuff like that. Yeah, so smoking, maybe not so much benefits. Nicotine, there are benefits.
Okay, well let's just say no.
I say no. There are no benefits.
So that's
net benefit? No. Negative.
All right.
Yeah.
And let's see. Also, speaking of net benefit. You can get some net benefit if you want to try something called Jocko White Tea. If you're worried, if you're not a tea drinker, don't worry because it doesn't taste like tea. It tastes like victory here. And you know what? Don't take my word for it. I got some reviews. We got a bunch of reviews on Amazon, and you know what? They're all awesome. Yeah. They're all 12-star, right? So here's one. After drinking 1 cup of this balanced and delicious tea, I was able to execute a flying triangle on my black belt jiu-jitsu instructor while discovering the mystery behind dark matter in the universe. It actually isn't dark matter. It's a combination of Jocko's chin and Echo Charles's biceps, altering the gravitational field from random celestial bodies. So, there's some good stuff here. I can't speak to deadlift performance, but what I can comment is a significant increase in production while performing farm work. Most noticeably, I can dig post holes in hard southern clay in half the normal time while under the influence of Jocko White Tea. Tastes great, and I highly recommend it for farmers, landscapers, construction workers, or anyone who wants to get after it. So I didn't, I wasn't familiar with that. But you do notice right now, like the economy's improving a lot. We're like, everything's getting better. I think it's a lot of people are drinking Jocko White Tea. They're working harder.
Yeah, but so that you're saying correlate, you're not necessarily saying.
I'm not saying it's a fact. I'm just saying it's factual.
Yeah.
And, this guy here bought this from my wife. She's 5'2", 120 pounds. She was deadlifting 250 pounds, by the way. That's double body weight. Already impressive. After a week of imbibing this fine product, her deadlift suddenly increased to 1,250 pounds. Now, that might seem like a lot, but it happened, right? It's right there. Standard. I mean, this has been documented on Amazon reviews. So you can't lie on those things.
It's got to be true.
We started throwing Jocko White Tea bags in 500-gallon water tank on the fire truck.
Dang.
Little known fact, Jocko White Tea is 3 times wetter than water. We are now extinguishing fires 3 times faster, and in the process, anyone on scene who gets sprayed immediately starts getting after it. So there's a little side effect, but it's a positive side effect. It's not negative.
Yeah.
Like you're putting out the fire, someone he gets hit with some water by accident, they're not going to complain. They're going to start doing burpees. We got a warning here. Too aggressive. Do not drink at work. Literally ripped the door trim off the wall after consuming this victory in a glass. Luckily, since getting after it is my new default mode, I was able to repair the damage before the boss noticed. Replaced pathetic. This is my best part, or the best part of this one. Replaced pathetic screws with lag bolts. Do you know what lag bolts are? They're like, instead of a screw, which is like a little tiny pencil thing, a lag bolt is a big bolt that you like.
The real deal.
Yeah.
Dang.
That's your mindset.
Default. Yep.
Now, I mentioned this before, and I don't know if I should necessarily do this, but I kind of think I should.
Gotta. Yeah.
There's a poem that someone wrote about Jocko White Tea, and it's based on the poem Infantry Columns by Kipling. This one is talking about Jocko White Tea, probably worth talking about here.
Yes.
So we'll go. Here we go. Jocko White Tea. I'm hot, brew, 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 brewing up some Jocko tea. Hot, 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 brewing up some Jocko tea. Drink, 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 drink it down and brew again. There's no tea leaves in the pour. 3, 2, 4, 5, tasty cup of tea a day. 7, 3, 5, 9 cups the day before. Drink, 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 drink it down and brew again. There's no tea leaves in the pour. Do, 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 do. Crush what is in front of you. Drink, 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 drink it down and brew again. Good, 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 good. Will answer everything. There's no tea leaves in the pour. I've drank whole box and getting after it. Press, lift, squat, roll, then right back to it again. Drink, 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 drink it down and brew again. And there's no tea leaves in the pour. So, just when someone writes a review like that,
Yeah.
I think that might be the best. As a matter of fact, let's just face it. That's the best review that's ever been written on Amazon. So good on you. That's the best review ever.
It was very impressive.
It was very impressive. And so that's that. Also, if you want to pre-order a little book coming out called Way of the Warrior Kid, and you can order it, and I'll tell you why. This book, you might be wondering what this book is about. This book is about everything. So I want to read a little excerpt to you. Mm-hmm. Young Mark, remember at the beginning of the book, he could do 0 pull-ups. Doesn't know how to do any pull-ups. Wasn't strong enough. Now he works through the summer. His Uncle Jake has shown him some good workout programs. And finally, he's built up over the summer, goes through some plateaus, gets through them, getting after it, training hard. Finally, towards the end of summer, he gets his first day of doing 10 pull-ups, right? And so here's what happens. We're going back to the book. And that was it. I was now officially a kid who can do 10 pull-ups. No more hiding from the pull-up bar in school. No more being embarrassed about being weak. This was real. As I thought about this, I looked at Uncle Jake and said, "Thanks." "No problem, Mark. And I want you to remember something. This isn't just about pull-ups. You know what else this is about, right?" I wasn't quite sure. "I don't know." Uncle Jake grabbed me by both shoulders and looked me straight in the eyes and said gravely, "This is about everything." Everything. Just think, 2 months ago, you couldn't do any pull-ups at all. 0. Now you can do 10. All it took was a good plan and the discipline to execute that plan, to do it. That's what it takes, and you can apply that to just about anything. If you are willing to do the work, you can make things happen. And like I told you, no one else is going to do the work for you. Sure, you might get some help along the way, but you might not. Who knows? What we do know is this. Hard work and discipline are how you achieve things. You have to make things happen, and that is exactly what you did here, and you can do that with almost anything in life. Remember that. Uncle Jake's putting out some word to young Mark. So there's all kinds of good lessons for, I'd love to say it's a kid's book. It's a kid's book, basically. I'm going to tell you what. you might want to order it for yourself.
Yeah, it's an everybody book.
It's an everybody book. It's an everybody book. So that's that. Check out that book. Also, just released Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. Sometimes we need to refer to the manual on how to do things right.
Mm-hmm.
We need the manual if we're going to refer to it.
It's true.
The manual's coming. You can pre-order that one too. It's about everything. You know, that one's more aimed at an adult audience.
Yeah.
It is adult.
Yeah. Dig it.
Not that there's like bad words in it.
Right.
Or anything like that. There's no obscene topics.
Yeah.
Unless you think donuts are a bad word. Because they're in there. We talk about them a little bit and their evilness. So yeah, you can get that one too. Of course, you can get Extreme Ownership. It's about leadership in combat and business, and it's about life. And you know, from what we learned in combat, the lessons that we learned in combat, they will help you in your business and they will help you in life. So get a copy. Get a copy for your team. And, you know, get up and down the chain of command. Up and down the chain of command. They need it. Also, I wanted to mention this. Echelon Front, right? This is the company, Leif Babin and I, who wrote the book Extreme Ownership with me. This is our company, Leadership and Management Consulting. That's what we do. We've also got JP Donnell on board. We got Dave Burke on board. And we work with companies, help them align their leadership around the principles from the book Extreme Ownership, the things we learned in combat. If you need this, and this is the reason I'm saying this right now, normally I don't talk about, or I haven't talked about this much, but people sometimes have a hard time figuring out how to get information. Echelonfront.com, that's the business website. Yeah. If you want to bring us on board, info@echelonfront.com. You can email that address, and then people can get there. You don't need to go to a speaker's bureau if you want to hear me speak, or if you want to hear Leif speak, or if you want to hear...
What is that?
A speaker's bureau is... they're companies that facilitate speakers
like
coming.
An agent almost.
Yeah, they're like an agent. Yeah. So if you don't know how to contact... If you want to hear Jocko talk, you want to have Jocko come and talk at your company, you type speaker, Jocko Willing. There's a good chance Echelon Front will come up and say, oh, yeah, you can call this number, or you can email here, and that'll hook it up. Or there'll be someone else that says, you know, Bill's Speakers.
Right.
And they're advertising me. They're advertising everybody. People that,
right.
And they say, hey, if you want to, then they contact us.
Right.
But you got yourself a middleman in that scenario.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, actually, that's good because like people still email me.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, you know,
Echo, can you come and talk at our company?
No.
Can you tell us about?
Let me think.
Can you tell us about Onnit?
No. I think. Like,
No, you forward those things to me too.
Yeah, and I didn't know the info. I'll send them to like Jamie or something.
Oh yeah, so, yeah. So that's what you do.
Yes.
info@echelonfront.com, and you know, between Leif, JP, Dave Burke, and we do programs, like full programs at your company to get everybody aligned and on the same page. So that's what we do if you want to get some of that. And also, you can come to the muster in New York City. New York City, right?
Can't be mad at
New
that.
York City.
Yeah.
That's the place where we're going to be May 4th and May 5th doing at the Marriott Grand Marquis. Now, a couple things about the muster. Okay, this is different. Okay, this isn't a feel-good seminar to like pump you up. That is not what's happening at the muster. If you want that, don't come.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you won't be pumped up. I'm not saying you won't be motivated, but don't come if that's what you're looking for. There's not going to be any chanting, okay?
Yeah.
There's not going to be any like communal promises and that kind of stuff. That's not happening there. You're not going to fill out a dream board, okay? That's not happening. Don't come to the muster if that's what you want.
Yeah.
That's not what the muster is. This is practical tactics and strategies. Practical things that will help you lead your team and will help you lead yourself. So, if that's what you want, then come to the muster. If you want to chant and promise and stuff like this, don't come. Because that's not what it is. If you want to learn how to lead, come.
Yeah, they're. I mean, I'm just obviously going on the last one, but like you learn like scenarios. You know, that the Q&A part is straight up golden because everyone comes like, hey, I had this scenario that's been basically plaguing me for a year and it's just causing problems here, and you know, and everyone has their own one, and while they're all unique, they all kind of overlap with each other, and you guys are like, okay, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is the answer, and it's like, dang, now we have an answer. We go back to the work, and it like a lot of times it'll just solve like this one problem that affects all this other stuff. So, man, it's so effective.
It is, and when people come and they hear those questions get asked, and again, there's always an overlap on the questions, right? And there's overlap on the principles as well. You know, cover and move, simple, prioritize and execute, decentralized command. The explanations can stand alone on themselves, but you start getting into real world application, there's going to be they're going to overlap. You need all four of them, right? You need all four of them to solve your problem. You can't just solve a problem with decentralized command. Because if you try and do that, you'll make something too complex. You got to keep it simple. And by the way, there's going to be multiple problems that you're going to be trying to solve with your decentralized command. So you got to prioritize and execute. So that's the way it is for every problem that you're suffering. And then there's obviously other principles that we build upon that aren't just the 4 laws of combat. So that's what's good, is when people hear the way that you utilize these tools, they learn to utilize them themselves, right? That's what you're trying to do. It's like trying to teach someone to take pictures, right? You don't just, and I'm saying this because I've been talking about cameras. You don't just say, okay, here, point this and point this, set the setting to this, set the light over here, set this up, press this button, and there's your picture. That's cool. It works that one time. What happens when I step outside and there's different lighting? Or what happens when the subject is moving? You got to teach me how to do the job. You got to teach me the intricacies of it. You got to show me all those things. I got to learn how to use that tool. And that's what we do at the muster. You get these various tools. You don't just read about them and see what they are and say, okay, I understand what this tool is. Here, I'm holding this tool in my hand. It's sharp. I can cut with it. Well, guess what else you can do with this? There's a lot of things you can do with these tools that we put out at the muster. We take it to the next level. So if that's what you're looking for, come to the muster. And we got great feedback across the board. So yeah, come and get that. In the meantime, also, if there's something that you want to ask, or you have a question, or you want to give some feedback or comment about what we're doing here, or even if you just want to cruise with Echo Charles primarily, he's kind of the primary cruiser here. Yes. We're on the interwebs right now, today, yesterday. We'll be there tomorrow. Twitter, Instagram, and you know that we gotta be on that Facebook, and you can get us there. Echo is at Echo Charles, and I am at Jocko Willink. And to close this out for the day, thanks first of all to all the people in uniform that are out there holding the line against terror, against extremism, against criminals, against fire and disaster, against accidents, and against the unexpected. All of you, thank you for keeping us safe, and everyone else out there, thank you for listening. And I would also ask that you be thankful. You be thankful for your freedom. Your precious and costly freedom. Because sometimes when something is given to us, just given to us, we forget what the cost was. We forget the price that was paid. And there was a price paid for our freedom, a massive price. There are those that paid everything they had for our freedom. So don't waste it. Don't abuse it. Don't squander it. Our time here is limited. Your time here is limited. And you have this freedom. You have this gift. So what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it today, right now? Ask yourself that question. Ask. And then go out and get after it. So until next time, this is Echo and Jocko. Out.